Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Angel Mutation Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Babies abandoned in front of hero agencies wasn't rare, unfortunately. It barely made the news anymore. Same with petty crime and street brawls. It was just another part of the job for some. There would be a half-hearted effort to reach out to the biological parents before the infant was rehomed with a foster family almost immediately. The running joke in certain hero circles was that the public didn't trust you as a real hero until someone was willing to leave their child with you. Others maligned that the proper channels were so openly abysmal that dumping a newborn with a random public figure looked like the better option. It was in a lot of ways. The average hero had money to spare for sponsoring a child, and even minor publicity would attract more potential adopters. And then there was All Might, a hero who was so famous and beloved, there were enough abandoned children left to him to warrant a small department dedicated to managing them. But what was not common was for Toshinori to be the first to find the child. His heart sank as soon as he saw the box. A few scraps of cardboard in the snow, sitting in a trash-filled alley by the back door of the agency. An unbearably sad sight. Toshinori wasted no time with pity. He rushed over and scooped up the little one as quick as he was gentle. There was some snow on top of the blanket. They had been there for a little while, which meant he needed to get them inside now. The building's interior was a good 30 degrees warmer. There now, that's better, he murmured. The little lump in the box didn't stir. The blanket was wet and freezing. Oh no, please don't let it be too late. I couldn't bear it. He remembered reading somewhere that babies could suffocate if their face was covered. That might have got them if the cold didn't. What a horrible thought. He pictured a young mother who didn't know better trying to protect her baby from the cold. Steeling himself, he uncovered the soaked blanket. And paused. There wasn't a baby in the box, but an egg. A dappled, deep green egg about the size of a particularly small newborn. Toshinori blinked. That's different. Toshinori took the rest of the day off. Too much research to do. First thing he did was confirm it was even alive. He held a flashlight up to the shell, a process called candling, and the whole thing lit up orange, with red veins scattered around. Toshinori almost gasped. He turned the egg around until he found where the veins came together in a dark spot. It twitched ever so slightly. A heartbeat. There were far too many things to keep track of when hatching eggs. Temperature, humidity, weight, airflow, how many times to turn it over, and adjusting all of that during different stages of development. And people do this as a hobby. But those hobbyists proved infinitely valuable with multiple guides and instructions on how to rig the heating apparatus from a small chicken egg incubator to work for a larger setup. Said setup was a wooden crate lined with styrofoam and a few wires and tubes sticking out. Toshinori based his measurements on the guide for emu hatching. That's what everyone in civilian services at his agency thought it was. An emu egg. Left there as either a strange gift or even stranger prank. One person suggested whoever left it made the scene look like a stereotypical abandoned baby scene to see if the agency would really try to rehome it. Time and resources were better spent of surefire cases, they said. And even if it was really the result of a quirk, the average foster volunteer didn't have the knowledge or experience to incubate an egg. So Toshinori took it home himself. The time it took to build the incubator and let the temperature adjust was the perfect amount to wash and dry the blanket the egg came in. It was green and covered in a pattern of red and gold ornaments. A Christmas blanket. The colors were vibrant and the fabric soft. It must have been new. Not the sort of thing one would expect someone who didn't care to leave behind. Toshinori used it to line the bottom of the box and carefully placed the egg inside. There you go, he whispered. The egg itself was also a deep green and nearly as big as his hand. That's what convinced the agency team it was an emu. But the color wasn't as dark and there were larger brownish-green spots. It looked more like a giant quail egg. And there were certainly weirder quirks out there. To make sure the air flowed properly around the box, he put the whole thing on his kitchen table. Staring it down during dinner brought it home that he was really doing this. This might be the craziest thing I've done in a while. The Civilian Services Department agreed. One of them posted on social media how All Might was so naively kind, not in those exact words but it was implied, that he'd go for an obvious prank of thinking an egg was a human child. The replies argued that he couldn't be that stupid. As more or less a joke, Toshinori chimed in with, "And what of it if I am?" along with a picture of the egg. He didn't bother looking at the replies. They'd all lose interest in a few weeks, just like always. After one last peek inside the box, Toshinori went to bed, thoughts circling about whether or not he really was crazy. Emu eggs take about 50 days to hatch. If that was the case, he'd have his answer by then. Day 50 came and went. Then day 60. And 70. 80. 90. Nothing. Toshinori candled the egg again on day 100. The thing inside was still alive and moving, while the orange color around it shifted to a darker, almost brown red. Twisting veins blocked out any distinguishing features. Maybe that one extra dark spot was an eye, but he wasn't sure. The development chart on his laptop said these features only marked the halfway point. He looked up the GSTTN rates of other egg-laying animals. Penguins were the longest of the birds at 2 months. The longest fish took 4 to 5 months. Some species of octopus took over 4 years to hatch. Day 103 was Easter. Toshinori tweeted a picture of the egg next to a couple of smaller decorated ones and a bunny plushie. Most of the responses expressed shock he still had it. On day 141, Toshinori went to a charity ball. Those sorts of things tended to be hit or miss for him. At least the timer on his phone for when to turn the egg would give him a good excuse to leave if it didn't turn out well. High-ranking pros, current and retired, made up most of the guest list. Toshinori knew quite a few of them, and was able to hold pleasant enough conversation. He'd been considered the symbol of peace a good 5 or 6 years now. People respected him, liked him. He wouldn't call any of them his friends, but he enjoyed their company for what it was. Some spoke purely in pleasantries while others made friendly jabs at him. The egg, of course, was a popular topic. 2 different people ordered a plate of deviled eggs to be sent to his table. And to be fair, they were delicious. Things were going well, all things considered. They took a turn when the black dog appeared. "All Might, how are you tonight, young man?" He draped an arm over Toshinori's shoulder, or at least tried to as he was much shorter, and steered them outside. The retired hero came from a long line of werewolf-like shapeshifters. Some say his ancestors were some of Japan's first heroes. True or not, his family's reputation of premium heroes was well-earned in the modern age. "What can I do for you, sir?" Toshinori asked respectively. "Sir?" As if I wasn't already feeling old, he joked. His graying mustache bounced with his laugh. Toshinori laughed with him. "But I do have something to ask. An offer, actually." "All right, shoot." He expected some sort of collaboration on merch or another fundraiser or something. Nothing close to what he actually said. "With all this egg nonsense going on, have you given much thought to starting a family of your own?" "What?" The old icon smiled knowingly. "You see my granddaughter over there?" He pointed to a young woman sitting with a few others on a large stone bench. The Red Wolf, Toshinori recognized, though they'd never met officially. Her grandfather confirmed this was the first High Hero Society even she'd attended. Now that she'd back from college, she's of marrying age, eh? He elbowed his side. "Have you talked to her about it?" Toshinori responded reflexively. "There is no good place this conversation can go." "Oh, don't worry. Sweet girl's had a crush on you since high school." "High school?" He took a sip of his drink while his brain rebooted itself. "Don't give me that face," the dog teased. "How old are you again? Late 20s? 30s? 33 in June." "Bah. When I was your age, I already had 3 kids. Now look at me. Folks are going to have to start calling me the gray dog." Ha! This whole conversation was apparently hilarious to him. Sir," Toshinori said with forced pleasantry. "I appreciate the offer, really do, but I'm not in a good place to start that sort of thing right now. And I'm sure your granddaughter will want some more time in the field before settling down. But I'll keep you all in mind. Have a good evening." And he booked it back inside. He was not safe there. If you're not looking to be tied down, we don't have to get married. Trip, the flying hero, suggested later in the night. At least she's making the offer herself. Again, flattered, but not what I'm looking for right now, Toshinori explained, exasperated. Why not? Her long purple dress blew slightly in the wind, even though they were indoors. Must have been her quirk. I mean, you've got it all. Your quirk is unmatched in power and spectacle, no big drawbacks or weaknesses, and the looks to pull it all together. She came from another prominent hero family and had been jumping around the top 10 since she debuted 15 years prior. Unlike the Red Wolf, Toshinori knew her. They'd been to a lot of the same events and occasionally worked together on fighting larger villains and organizations. He respected her. If they saw more of each other, Toshinori thought they might have become friends. But everything she said set off sirens. Imagine if you added flight to that mix. Toshinori left that conversation with even less dignity. By far the strangest of the strange encounters that night was Endeavor. He'd been number 2 almost as long as Toshinori had been number 1, yet they hardly ever crossed paths. Whenever he tried to make conversation, the other man made a show of ignoring him. The assumption was always that he was just a stick in the mud who took himself way too seriously. But this time, the man on fire came up to him. "You really are a bigger fool than they say," came the bitter voice accompanied by crackling flames. "Then who says?" Toshinori questioned honestly. He scoffed. The dog clan's shapeshifting is not only powerful, but they also have a healing factor that closes even the deepest wounds in days. Rumor has it they are immune to most diseases as well. And then flight combined with your quirk would have made any offspring you produce untouchable. Toshinori almost choked on his drink. And you waste your time babysitting what's at best street trash, and at worst a paperweight. He sputtered. How was one supposed to respond to that? If you must lower yourself to such a task to satisfy your morals, at least have the decency to do so in private. His eyes burned hotter than his flaming beard. The symbol of peace represents us all, and fawning over leftovers makes us all look bad. Toshinori suddenly felt small in the presence of the shorter man. He wanted to jump into a speech about how every child had value, regardless of the quirk or origin, or how the ethics of quirk marriage were questionable at best. But he felt his phone vibrate with an alarm. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he declared and promptly headed home. Another baby was left behind on day 177. This time, an intern found her near a staff entrance. Toshinori saw her twice. Once that first day when he went to check in and get a photo for the press. Second 2 weeks later for another photo op with her new foster parents. "Oh, you poor thing," the mother kept saying. "What a horrible way to start your life." Mother was probably some psycho druggie. "That's the only kind of woman who could even think of giving up her baby," the father whispered. "I know, right? Those women should be grateful they can still have their own kids." Toshinori cringed in the corner. They either thought he couldn't hear them or didn't care. By pure coincidence, day 200 was Toshinori's birthday. Gran ordered an omelet when they went out to lunch. "You're gonna make fun of me too, huh? Are you seriously surprised? That goal is wide open," the old man sneered. He dramatically took a bite. The other patrons of the bistro paid them no mind, but Toshinori feared their pressure all the same. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk with fans. Far from it. Interacting casually with the public could one of the most rewarding and least emotionally draining parts of being a hero. Just not on his day off. And not lately. Few encounters the last few months went without mention of the egg. Toshinori adjusted his hat to make sure all his hair was hidden. "I admit," he began with a sigh, "kinda strange you're not the only one lately. That's what you get for surrounding yourself with yes men. You start buying your own hype." He garbled through a mouthful of food. In contrast to Toshinori's disguise, he wore his hero costume. Like always. "Oh, don't give me that look. You know I gotta get one dig in." I know. It's just been weird." He pushed around his rice. "People have been weird." "Well, go on. It's your birthday, you're entitled to a rant. Have people ever given you crap for not having kids?" Toshinori asked cautiously. Gran swallowed. All the time when I was your age. And a while after. Get used to it. He cut another slice of his omelet without looking up. A sudden smile creeped up his face. Got a few of the pushier folk off my back by telling them about my big-shot hero kid in Tokyo. That made Toshinori smile too. So, there were a lot of pushy people? More than enough. Were any of them, mean about it? His smile faded. That gave him pause. Mean how? Okay, so, Toshinori took a quick swig of water. For some reason, a good chunk of the people on my side, who believe the egg is human, also think it's bad for me to be taking care of it. And their reasoning is that it's somehow distracting me from finding a real family. To be fair, it is distracting you. Gran, I'm serious, he pleaded. People have been writing full-blown essays online and yelling at me in photo ops about how it's my moral duty to reproduce and pass on my quirk. Well, they're going to be disappointed, Gran chuckled. Then he sighed, looking over the other people eating lunch. Since when is eugenics making a comeback? I think it's been that way for a while. I got some of those comments from other heroes too, Toshinori said somberly. I got 2 offers for quirk marriage in one night. One from the black dog for his granddaughter, one from Trip, number 8 in the country. I think that's just old money nonsense. Bunch of blowhards who they think they can reinstate ancient aristocracy by inbreeding like them. I wouldn't be too worried. But it's not just old hero families, he argued. People on the street have been saying this. Plus, if it was just some noble blood nonsense, would they still have offered arranged marriages to me? A first-generation hero with no family at all? Toshinori cleared his throat and sunk into his seat when he realized how loud he was being. Gran waited patiently for him to finish, expression unreadable. And you know Endeavor? Number 2 in Japan right after me? He's first generation too. And a couple months ago, same night as the others, he said he raised some real red flags. A waiter came to refill their glasses. Gran didn't speak until he left. So what are you going to do about it? You see a problem. How are you going to deal with it? Gran interrogated. Toshinori sat up. Well, I'm not taking them up on their marriage proposal for one. Obviously. And I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open around these people. Got a real bad vibe from those heroes especially. He finally took a bite of his rice. And what? The egg, bonehead. He reached across the table to flick his forehead. What are you gonna do when it actually hatches? You gonna give the kid up, teep him? Toshinori stared blankly, Gran's belief in him flying right over his head. I don't know. Day 221 was the anniversary of Nana's death. Toshinori hardly slept the night before. He never did, though he did manage to hold off breaking down until sunrise. Once that first stream of light peeked through his window, he had no choice but to get moving. He made her favorite food, simple Japanese curry, and placed it on her shrine in the corner next to lit incense. Her smiling image seared a hole in his heart. Then he cried. A few hours later, Toshinori sat across from the egg eating his portion of the now cold curry. He candled it once more. Nothing else to do. Most of the orange and red had been replaced by white and black, the air sac and the mbayo. The chart said it was nearly done. What happened to your mother? He asked it. Did she leave you because she loved you and thought you'd be better off away from her? The egg stayed quiet, because why wouldn't it? Nana never told him about her son. Toshinori learned about him after the fact from Gran. But he remembered a room in her house he wasn't allowed, a name he couldn't ask about, a few days a year where his master needed to be alone. Gran promised not to look for him should something happen, and Toshinori inherited that promise, no questions asked. The couple who took the last left-behind baby came to mind. The ones who bashed the birth mother they knew nothing about. I should have spoken up. It's not fair what they said. He wondered what became of Nana's son. Did his new family teach him to hate her? Or did he do that on his own? Or did she not want you? Toshinori thought of his own birth mother. The image-obsessed social climber that took her anger and embarrassment at having a child out of wedlock on the child himself. She would have fit right in with those assholes advocating for quirk marriages had she not been quirkless. For too much of his youth was spent wondering how much of that hatred was her own, and how much was the vitriol her own family threw at her redirected. Once he got older, he realized that it didn't matter what it was she felt or how much of it was real. Her actions were real. Her cruel words, her suffocating control, her impossible expectations. Toshinori ran himself ragged trying to meet because she was his mother and he knew nothing but love for her. All real. All things she didn't have to do. Whether or not there was any real love under that was irrelevant. Toshinori didn't know a real mother's love until Nana. Maybe it is best you're with me. He moved closer. I won't hurt you. I'd never hurt you, he whispered, throat burning. The stuffed bunny from Easter still sat on top of the box. Gently, Toshinori moved it next to the egg. I'll do everything I can to find someone who loves you. And if I can't, that someone will be me. A fat tear rolled down his face. I promise. The rest of the day was quiet. The early morning of day 239 was not. Toshinori got home late, just after midnight, to a tiny sound. He thought he imagined it at first. He stood frozen in his kitchen for a whole minute to make sure it was really there. And it was. A little cry. He rushed over to the box. The egg was still a moment, then wobbled. A crack already formed. Toshinori essayed in a breath. Holy sheet. Holy sheet. Whatever emotion he felt, it overwhelmed him. This was actually happening. Nearly a year of constant care came to this. His arms shook all the way up to his shoulders. A smile split his face. He still had his costume on and was in desperate need of a shower, but he couldn't look away. Back and forth the egg moved for the next hour. Toshinori set up his phone to record it. Waiting was torture. But everything he read said to not do anything to try and help. In addition to being delicate, the hatchling and eggshell were still connected by a web of blood vessels. Disconnecting too fast could leave them to bleed out. So he watched that cracked spot like a hawk. Suddenly, something pushed out the crack. Toshinori held his breath. Little green pieces of shell obstructed what was trying to come out. He bit his lip, eyes blown wide. The mass pushed away more of the shell, pausing for a few seconds in between. Before he knew it, enough shell was gone to see. What poked out of the hole wasn't a beak or snout like he expected, but a foot. A tiny, unmistakably human foot. What wasn't human was the squeal Toshinori made at the sight. He couldn't resist reaching down into the box to touch it. The sole was no thicker than his finger. It retracted back inside the egg at the touch, along with a little whine. Hey you, he whispered, choking up. His whole body was shaking now. Is this what new parents feel like? The thought came unbidden but repeated over and over while he watched two tiny feet kick open a hole. The guide said that hatching chicks could take breaks of 6 to 12 hours after getting a hole going while their lungs adjusted. That was enough time, Toshinori thought, to get in the shower. Turning away was hard, but he wanted to be clean around a new baby. He received a stark reminder that this was a human baby, not a bird, once he stepped out. Full on wailing. In just a towel he rushed back to the kitchen. The narrow part of the egg was all but completely open, leaving two red feet exposed and struggling. Sure sounds like his lungs are adjusted. The little guy was clearly crying for help, as babies did. All those guides and warnings played over in his head, but this was different. This was a human. Toshinori decided to take a risk. As gently as he possibly could, he tucked both hands beneath the eggshell. With one, he carefully, more carefully than he'd ever done anything in his life, slid the shell off. The other sat ready to catch the little head. And he was oh so little. Toshinori could hold his whole body in one hand with room to spare. Not that he did. As soon as he set the eggshell aside, he pulled up the blanket, still warm from the incubator, from the box and wrapped him in it, whispering soothing words all the while. Hey, it's okay. It's all right. I'm here, he cooed. He held the screaming bundle close to his chest, leaning down close so his breath helped keep him warm. I'm here, it's all right. Toshinori's nose grazed his forehead. His pudgy red face scrunched up as he cried as hard as his little lungs would allow. Said lungs couldn't have been bigger than Toshinori's thumbnail, yet his sobs filled the whole apartment. I'm here. I'm here. Over and over. Finally, Mercifully, his crying subsided. Toshinori sighed with relief. He ran a thumb over thin wisps of wet black hair that crowned the baby's head. There were lumps under the back of the blanket, which he initially thought were clumps of shell he didn't move before wrapping him up. But unraveling the blanket revealed 2 stubby limbs partially covered in more black fuzz sticking out from the baby's back. Wings. But Toshinori's undoing were his eyes. Blinking slowly, the baby looked out at the world for the first time. At Toshinori. As green as the eggshell, those eyes melted Toshinori's soul. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't put him down. He held him closer as tears welled up. Any and all thoughts were buried under one. Izuku. Tonight, we have a very interesting and very sweet story concerning the number 1 hero, All Might. Some of you may recall our segment a few months ago concerning a very strange object left outside the All Might agency. A large egg. An egg that the symbol of peace elected to take care of himself after social services did not share his suspicions that it was a human baby affected by a quirk. You may also recall that some of us here at the station didn't believe him either. Well, I owe a certain meteorologist $10. Izuku was born, or should I say hatched, early last Friday morning. A healthy baby boy with a tiny wing quirk. The viral video of said hatching, posted to All Might's personal Twitter earlier today, shows his extraordinary first moments of life. This included being helped out of his shell and comforted by the world's greatest hero. Hey, it's okay. It's all right. I'm here. Shortly after, Izuku was taken to the hospital for checkups, where he has been in observation since due to being slightly underweight. But he is expected to receive a clean bill of health in the coming days, at which point he can go home. And where is home? With All Might himself. Yes, the symbol of peace is now a single father. He responded to questions on social media to confirm this, saying, "I've already been caring for him for a few months, what's another lifetime?" No word yet on how this will affect his work as a hero. But at least one child now has a parent. We'll be right back after this. Welcome home, Izuku, Toshinori whispered. He carefully placed the baby carrier on the floor by the couch. There was so much he had to do still. Adoption hadn't been the original plan, so there had been basically zero prep for a new baby. Toshinori ordered most of the supplies he needed while waiting in the hospital. Some were in. Then an hour before, didn't need to be changed, and had no signs of fever or other sickness. Toshinori, of course, panicked. What if it was a disease without any visible symptoms? What if it was a genetic condition only just now starting to show up? What if it was always there and it was suddenly too late and Izuku couldn't take it anymore? He just wants your attention, I think, Dave said over the phone. You think that's it? Toshinori had called to get a second opinion before taking him to the doctor yet again. You're his dad and he loves you. It worked with Melissa. Just give it a try. He did the next time Izuku cried inexplicably. Hey, it's okay, he whispered to the screaming little bundle. Once in range, Izuku grabbed onto his finger with all the strength his little baby hands could muster. Toshinori brought him up close to his face and sang a lullaby he didn't know the words to. Izuku calmed almost immediately and watched his singing father with all the wonder in the world. He still cried, but not as much after that. Izuku's real personality came out soon after. He loved to sit in his father's lap while he read or sang to him. Around 5 months, he started babbling along. With slow songs, Izuku tried to make sounds faster and louder than Toshinori in his own little game. When Toshinori copied his little noises, he squealed like it was the greatest thing in the world. A new game he came up with at 6 months was pointing at something to get Toshinori to say what it was. That's a table. A spoon. Old man. Hey. Gran snipped, kicking Toshinori in the back. Don't be mean, that sets a bad example, he countered. Ah. Izuku added. He pointed at Toshinori. I'm daddy. Ada. Toshinori beamed. 8 months brought Izuku starting to crawl short distances, as well as picking up and naming stuff of his own. Toshinori often had to pick him up to keep him out of somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. One day, when Toshinori jokingly chastised him for running away from nap time, Izuku smacked his cheek hard. "Dada," he declared. Toshinori held in a scream, then spammed all his friends' phones with messages. He was away when Izuku took his first steps. While Toshinori cut public appearances to raise his new son, there were still villains to fight. In the aftermath of a massive kaiju-class takedown, dust still in the air, he watched the video from Gran. Izuku pulled himself to his feet by holding onto the couch, wings flapping wildly in what might have been an attempt at balance. He took 2 steps back and immediately fell. Then he turned to Gran, who said, "Nice job, Omelette." Toshinori wanted to be mad at first. He missed a major milestone in his son's life for what? Some petty thief. Had there not been people around, he might have kicked the poor sod while he was down. At least it's on video. He rewatched the video every moment he could until he got home. Bitterness ebbed and flowed. How much else am I going to miss fighting villains? I mean, of course the lives of others are important and I should help when I can. But I still need to be there for my boy. The next day, All Might put out his first and only call for a sidekick. A man called Night Eye would answer the call right away. But that evening, Toshinori returned to his apartment to find Izuku cuddled up in Gran Torino's arms with a fistful of the old man's whiskers. And he wasn't mad anymore. "Toshi! Dave!" The 2 friends crushed one another in a hug, the larger picking the smaller up off the ground. "Thanks for coming," Toshinori said. "Don't mention it," Dave replied, fixing his glasses. A little blonde head poked out from behind his legs. Toshinori knelt down. "And who's this nice young lady?" "Don't be shy, Melissa. It's just Uncle Toshi, he doesn't bite." She gripped her father's pants. "Oh, it's okay," he assured, standing up. "She hasn't seen me since she was a baby, probably doesn't remember." "Do too," she barked suddenly. Dave chuckled. "She hates not knowing things." "Well, then you must know everything, huh?" "Yep." She stood proud on her own, stomping her light-up shoes. "Do you know why you're here then?" Toshinori asked. "Baby Zoo's birthday." It's Izadash. Got it in one." "Come on in," Toshinori cheered. Melissa's shyness vanished in an instant, and she ran inside as fast as her little 3-year-old legs could take her. She barreled through every room in the house, nearly tripping over Izuku playing with blocks on the floor. "Can I play with the baby?" she asked Gran. "Long as you're careful," he grumbled. She wrapped her arms around Izuku's middle and tried to carry him off. "Melissa, be gentle, he's little," Dave shouted. He walked over to pull her off him, but she sat down with Izuku in her lap. "Why is his hair funny?" "'Cause it's feathers, not hair." "Why feathers?" "It's his quirk." She poked his wings. "Can he fly?" "Not yet." "Are you my grandpa?" "I only have one grandchild, thank you very much," Gran bellowed. But Melissa was undeterred and kept firing a barrage of questions. Dave sighed and set their gift on the counter. "Get ready for that in a year or so." "Looking forward to it." He patted his friend on the back. "Asking lots of questions is the root of a great researcher, isn't it?" "I guess so," Dave sighed. They watched Melissa annoy Gran and fuss over Izuku, who couldn't care less, in silence for a few minutes. "So, being a dad, how's it treating you?" "Pretty all right, I'd say," Toshinori answered. He sighed too. It's just hard to believe it's already been a year." Dave nodded. "I get it." Toshinori decided to keep online posts about Izuku to a minimum until he was old enough to consent. And he almost regretted it, because Izuku was the cutest, most perfect, precious baby ever. The way his chubby little fingers held onto Toshinori's clothes whenever he held him. His tiny feet kicking in his sleep. That heart-melting grin with a few baby teeth poking through. He was about twice the size of when he was born, maybe more. A year went by so fast. So many things happened. Shame so few people got to see them. Why you gotta get so big so fast? Toshinori found himself whispering one night a few weeks later. Izuku happily grabbed at his father's bangs. The boy laid across the man's chest and crawled up half his face in pursuit. He'd just outgrown his last jumper, and this brand new one left a little room for him to grow into. Teensy wings flapped in time with his giggles. There had been a poll a few years back that asked people what quirk they would want if they could change their own. Flight was at the top of the list. Even in the days before quirks, almost all the best superheroes could fly. Toshinori thought of those great winged heroes, the courageous angel of the X-Men or the regal Hawkman of the Justice League, and imagined his son among them. The great hero Izuku, floating gracefully above an adoring crowd after he saved the day again. If his son decided not to be a hero, there was so much out there for flyers. Racing leagues, professional acrobats, no shortage of films and TV shows with angel characters. And who knew what he could come up with himself? The whole world was waiting for him. Izuku poked Toshinori in the eye in an effort for the hair. "Hey," he chuckled. The little toddler was scooped up and drowned in kisses. Said toddler laughed some more, then leaned in to give a kiss of his own. "Dada." Toshinori smiled until it hurt. "Everyone's going to love you, my boy." Izuku woke up before Dada. There was something in his room. He climbed out of his crib. He took his blankie too. Izuku crawled across the floor to the thing. It was always there, but he noticed now. He sat in front of it. In front of the mirror. Izuku looked into his own eyes and thought, for the very first time, "That's me." Izuku was the oldest kid in his flying class, but was the only one who couldn't fly. He watched 3- and 4-year-olds coast halfway across the gym from the edge of the padded floor, wings wrapped around his shoulders and fighting back tears. Some of them could even lift themselves off the ground, while he couldn't even glide. "Yagi? You want to give it another try?" Ms. Ayano asked. She nudged his back lightly with her cream-colored wing. "Come on, just one more time, okay?" Izuku didn't feel like he had a choice. He obediently climbed up the short steps to the gliding platform. It was the smallest one at only 4 feet off the ground. Still taller than Izuku. The other kids got to try the 6-foot one for the last class. He positioned his toes to hang just over the edge, like Ms. Ayano said. Just like he had been doing for almost 2 years. She told him what to do anyway. For a beginner's glide, he was supposed to just fall forward, not jump, with his wings open into his teacher's arms. She stood a few steps away, expecting him to catch some air. "Whenever you're ready," she chirped at him. She almost had to shout over the other kids laughing through their exercises. Izuku blocked them all out. He had to focus. This was his moment. Taking a deep breath, he raised his wings as wide as he could. The feathers reached just past his fingers now. Some kids in the class had even smaller wings, and they did fine. This was it. With a final inhale, he fell. "Oh no, Yagi, are you okay?" He laid there a moment, breathing in the plastic smell of the mat and letting the pain of slamming into it spread across his face. Then the others laughed. He held his breath to try and stop the tears. Ms. Ayano touched his shoulder, and he smacked her hand away with his wing. If she really wanted to help, she would have caught him. Izuku scurried away to hide behind the stacked boards in the corner. Against the wall they formed a little cave. The space was tighter than last year. Then he let himself cry. Class ended not long after. Izuku quieted down just enough to listen to Ms. Ayano and Mrs. Chinnen's speech to the rest of the class about how far they've come and how proud they are of them. Before they were even done, the first of the 6-year-old class came barreling in. Izuku poked his head out just enough to see the door. Not a single one set foot on the padded floor. They took off running from the lobby and came through already in the air. They chased each other all over the gym. Izuku recognized most of them. They were in his first beginner's class 2 years ago. They moved on, he did not. He slunk back into his hiding place and cried some more. "Yagi? Your grandpa is waiting for you," Mrs. Chinnen said. "I can't leave. They'll see me," Izuku whimpered. "Well, then you should not have hid when you made a mistake." She was a lot older than Ms. Ayano, but talked in about the same way. Meaning she had a happy voice no matter what she said. "Can I wait until they're gone?" "No," she said firmly. Izuku crawled out of his hiding place before she could drag him out. She grabbed his hand anyway. He had to trot to keep up with her wide steps. "Yagi's still here," someone shouted. Izuku yelped, and tried to cover his face with his wing. "He's in the baby class? Still? What's wrong with him? My mom says he's defective." "Don't hold up your wing like that, it's rude," Mrs. Chinen ordered, then forced it back with her own wing. Why don't you say hi to your old friends? Boo, but they're laughing at me. Oh, sweetie. They're laughing with you, not at you. Izuku didn't think she was very smart. They stopped by Ms. Ayano. She knelt in front of him. Bye, Yagi. We'll get it next time. She opened her arms for a hug. Izuku didn't want to though. He yanked his hand out of Mrs. Chinen's grasp, ran past them into the lobby, and hugged Gran instead. He rested his hand on the back of his head. You ain't okay, are ya, kid? He whispered. Izuku shook his head against his shoulder. He sighed. Payment all taken care of for this one? He asked the teachers. Yes. But we would like to discuss Dash. Then we're done here. Despite not being much taller, Gran picked up Izuku and turned around. He felt the eyes of his teachers and the other kids' mothers on him, though he didn't dare look up. One of them whispered something. You got something to say? Gran barked at the woman. Silence. Didn't think so. And they left. Izuku couldn't remember how or when he met Tenya. That's how long they had been friends. Tenya? Do you know what defective means? He asked. He balanced his toes on the ground from the swing, swaying back and forth only slightly. Most recesses were spent like that recently. His friend only just started to get some air. I think it means broken. Why? Somebody called me that at my last flying practice, he mumbled. Tenya skidded to a stop. Or, I guess he said his mom called me that and he was just repeating it. Still, that is not appropriate class behavior. Did you tell the instructor? He shouted. She was right there and didn't say anything. Izuku kicked up some. What about Gran? Did you tell him? Sort of. I think he knows anyway. When Izuku asked him what defective meant, he said it was nothing to do with him. I don't think I'm gonna take flying practice next summer. Why not? Because he's defective, that's why. Izuku hopped off the swing before the bullies could push him. One managed to grab some of his feathers before he could flee. Eep! The yank made him lose his balance and trip. Dirt got in his mouth. The bully, a kid called Fujiharu, held a clump of fuzzy gray feathers in his fist. He even squawks like a bird, he teased. The others laughed. Hey, you can't do that. Tenya defended, waving his hands wildly. He stood between them and his friend. Touching someone else's mutation is extremely rude, and ripping a piece off is assault. Mutation is right. He looks like he crawled out of a toxic waste field. Or from under an old couch. Those feathers look like dust bunnies. Izuku tried to hide his face again, but got mad at the sight of his wings. Ugly dark gray fuzz covered every inch of the stumpy limbs like a dirty sock puppet. He had that instead of normal hair too. A stranger wouldn't be able to tell what the other kids' quirks were by looking at them. Izuku's appearance is consistent with normal baby birds. Tenya kept going, and Izuku cringed. It is very likely that he will molt and grow more traditional feathers as he gets older. Hear that, baby bird? Maybe one day you won't look like a sick freak. Fujiharu snapped back. Yeah, then maybe your feathers will be worth something. Izuku flinched at that thought. He was the son of All Might, and everyone knew it. Other kids already tried to steal his stuff to sell online or as some kind of trophy. The idea that people might start going after parts of his body in the future genuinely frightened him. He wiped the dirt from his face as Tenya helped him up. That'll be the only thing you can do with them if you never fly. He got an evil look in his eye. I guess there's one other thing. What other thing? Izuku sniffled. Fujiharu grinned smugly. You really want to know what happens to people's wings when they can't fly? What? Izuku, Tenya warned, grabbing his friend's wrist. They get cut off. No! Izuku cried. His wings flared and pushed Tenya aside before he ran. The bullies laughed behind him. Through tears blocking his vision, he fled around the corner of the school building to the edge of the playground. He ducked under a flower bush. A thorny one. Sticky prickers tangled in his feathers and clothes. The mulch underneath was still wet from being watered earlier. Izuku curled up tight in a ball. Sometime later, the grass rustled. Izuku peeked outside his wings. Tenya sat in the wet grass, even though it would mess up his school shorts. I'm sorry I ran, Izuku whispered, and pushed you over. I'm sorry I didn't stick up for you better, he responded. Tenya. I'm supposed to be a hero, like my parents and brother, he explained. How can I protect everyone when I can't even protect my best friend? But I want to be a hero too. What kind of hero runs away to hide every time something bad happens? The two boys were quiet a moment. Then Tenya got up and crawled inside the bush to sit next to Izuku. Tenya hated messing up his clothes, so this was a lot. Then we'll get stronger together, he declared. A grin split Izuku's face as they hugged. Tenya was bigger than him, but always gentle. Especially with his wings. A branch poked them, and Izuku backed off. Tenya? Yes. Do you really think my feathers will change when I'm older? He questioned. A thorn he pulled out left sticky sap behind. I do, he responded confidently. All birds start out fuzzy, then their adult feathers grow in later. That's when they learn to fly. He pulled a leaf out of his hair. It said so in a library book. I can show you after school if you want. No, that's okay. Dad's coming back from his trip tonight, so Gran wants me to come straight home. Water dripped on his nose and he sneezed. Tenya pulled a tissue from his pocket, and Izuku took it. What if that means I won't be able to fly until I'm a grown-up? Will people start coming for my feathers before then? What if they take them so I can't ever fly? Then we'll wait, Tenya declared. Huh. We'll wait. Can't speed up nature. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Izuku frowned, and Tenya sputtered. I mean, I know I'm not really the person waiting. He tapped his engines. But I'll still be your friend the whole time. I promise I will always be there to lift your spirits and protect you from those that would do you harm. Izuku laughed at the funny way Tenya talked. What happens when I can fly? Not if what? He rubbed his chin and adjusted his glasses. We'll have a race. Why a race? Izuku asked with a tilt of his head. That's what my family does when something important happens, he elaborated proudly. It's an Ida family tradition to test one another's mettle after accomplishing a significant goal or overcoming major adversity. My quirk doesn't have mettle though. His wings shivered. True, but Tensei says that flying is naturally faster than running because there's less resistance. You mean like how a plane gets somewhere faster than a car? Izuku gestured a plane taking off with his hands. Exactly, he exclaimed with a thumbs up. My quick makes me faster than most people, and you have wings. By the time we're grown-ups, we should be almost even. And we'll still be friends then? Always. Tenya extended his hand, and Izuku shook it. In that case, I promise to get stronger and braver, so we can be heroes together. And then we spent the rest of recess talking about plans for how we can get better. And you had to do it under a bush, huh? Gran questioned. He pulled another pricker out of Izuku's head feathers and tossed it in the trash. They sat on the bench of the last train stop before home. It seemed more crowded than usual. What about those kids who pulled out your feathers? Did you tell your teacher? Yeah, he mumbled. Oh. Gran narrowed his eyes. What's that about? Did they get in trouble? I don't think so, Izuku admitted. Hours later, and the dried sap of the bush stuck his feathers together, making them really itchy. We didn't say anything until recess was over, and she said if we waited it must not have been that bad. Damn it, he sighed. Izuku gasped at his bad word, but Gran glared at him to be quiet. What is wrong with people lately? It wasn't a question. A light flashed. Izuku flinched and blinked. A tall man walked past them. Speaking of which, Gran got up and grabbed the man's sleeve. The heck was that? What? You just took a picture of my grandson, he shouted. Give me your camera. ID too. He flashed his hero license. What's the big deal, old man? A crowd gathered. Izuku shrunk behind his wings. A woman jumped in front of him and snapped a picture with her phone. Hey, he yelled. Gran looked back, and the first man took off running. Suddenly, even more camera flashes and noises went off. Some only had phones, others hand big fancy cameras. They talked over each other so much Izuku couldn't pick out what they said. Gran launched himself in the air and landed close to Izuku. The mob recoiled at the sudden burst of wind. Then, Gran grabbed Izuku and all their stuff before jumping over the tracks to the next platform over, where they jumped on the first train with open doors. "This isn't our train," Izuku said quietly, still tucked under his grandpa's arm. "I know that, kid." He put him down but kept his arm tight around his shoulders. With his gaze alone, he dared any of the other passengers to make a move. Izuku wiped his nose. It wasn't the first time something like that happened. For as long as he could remember, which granted wasn't long since he was only 6, strangers wanted to take his picture. Dad and Gran said it was because Dad was famous. When Dad was on TV surrounded by people taking his picture, he smiled and waved. He even answered the strangers' questions and told them jokes. Gran said those meetings were called press conferences and they were different from people following them around. But after fights with villains, more people would run up to him and he'd do some of the same stuff. Tenya's brother Tensei and other heroes too. Izuku knew this was one more thing he had to get better at if he wanted to be a great hero. But the fact that this was the closest to home the people with cameras had gotten made him nervous. It made Gran nervous too, which made it worse. Even Dad got nervous, but never Gran. They had to take a new long way home, and he was tense the whole time. And when they finally did get home, he spent a long time yelling on the phone. He said even more bad words than usual. Izuku listened from the bath. He'd been in there so long the water was lukewarm. Sticks and sap remained uncleaned. He didn't want to get out and get in the way, and make Gran even angrier, no matter how much his stomach growled. He sunk back until the water covered his mouth. Why is everyone so mean to me? Did I do something wrong? Is it because I can't fly? He blew bubbles. They're mean to Gran and Dad because of me too. What if they start being mean to Tenya because we're friends? What if they find my school? How do I fix this? Do I have to get my wings cut off? A door opened. "I'm home," Dad called. Izuku started crying again. He didn't know why. The better part of him knew he wouldn't be mad at him. He also knew Gran wasn't mad either. But the rest thought about his teachers and classmates, at school and flying class, and the people with cameras and him not being able to fly and just spiraled. If his brain wasn't in a fog, he would have identified the feeling as embarrassment. "He's still in there?" Izuku held his breath. He knocked. "Izuku? Can I come in?" "Fine." He kept his eyes away from him as he stepped in. Dad sat on the floor by the tub. He waited a bit to talk. "Gran told me, you've had a rough couple days, huh?" Izuku shut his eyes and nodded. Tears hit the bathwater. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head hard. "Okay," Dad liked his lips and sighed. Then he touched Izuku's head feathers. "How long have you been in here?" Shrug. "Well, it's not good for your feathers to be wet for so long. You want to wash up by yourself, or do you want my help?" Izuku looked up slowly at his father. He looked tired. His bangs were down, and the rest of his long curly hair drooped way more than usual. There was a faint shine to his chin where the light hit his blonde stubble. His smile wasn't as big as on TV. This smile said, "I love you, I missed you. I missed you too." He sat up and lifted his wings to be cleaned. Dad's smile got a little bigger. Without a word, he put soap on the feather comb and ran it through Izuku's wings as gently as possible. Dad's hands were so big, they didn't need a bucket to rinse the soap. He was somehow even more delicate with Izuku's head. He combed with one hand and held the back of his son's head and neck with the other. Izuku leaned back into it. He stayed that way all through Dad lowering his head into the water. He didn't even notice the giant thump wiping away his tears. Nothing was more relaxing. When it was over, Izuku changed into his pajamas and followed Dad out. Gran slept on the couch, still in his day clothes but with a blanket over him. "He said to tell you he was sorry for yelling." "He wasn't mad at you," Dad whispered as they walked past. "I know," he mumbled. "Did you have dinner yet?" "No." "Wanna just have popcorn?" Dad nudged his shoulder. "Popcorn." Izuku laughed. "That's not a dinner food." "Nothing is a dinner food. Dinner is a contract." Dad joked. Izuku didn't get it but he laughed anyway. From the table, he watched the bag go in the microwave with rapt attention. Dad directed him to keep watch while he got ready for bed. When he came back, he scooped Izuku up in his arms unexpectedly and tossed him in the air just above his head. Feeling better? Gran grumbled from the couch. Izuku was too busy being tickled to respond. The old man smiled and went back to sleep. Meanwhile, Dad carried Izuku and their popcorn to his bedroom. "What are we?" he gasped. A massive blanket fort took over almost half of Dad's room. He put the boy down and let him explore. It was so big, Izuku could almost stand up in it. "This is so cool." "Really? Think so?" Dad had to squeeze in carefully, pushing the popcorn bowl along the floor with him. "Yeah. Wanna sleep in here tonight?" "Really? Really?" Izuku scampered back to his room to grab his blankie and All Might plushie. Dad was queuing up a movie on his laptop when he got back. He rolled over, and Izuku climbed right on his chest. Careful of his wings, Dad wrapped the boy in the green blanket and held him close. Izuku was so comfy he didn't make it 15 minutes into the movie. "It's okay to want to hide sometimes. No shame in that," Dad whispered. He kissed his temple. "I love you, my boy. Nothing will change that." And Izuku drifted off. Izuku realized one day that he looked nothing like his father. He was over at Tenya's house after school, as he often was, when one of his mom's friends came to visit. "Tenya. Oh, it's so nice to see you again," the woman chirped. "Same to you, Mrs. A," he responded formally. Izuku meanwhile stood off to the side. His last growth spurt years behind him, he fit perfectly in his tall friend's shadow. Not that he minded. "I wonder who she is," he thought, staring. All the Ida's friends are pro-heroes. The short-haired woman wore a smart business suit with no distinctive uniform colors or badges. No obvious quirk features either. "My goodness, you've gotten so big," she took notice. "How old are you now?" 9, ma'am." "Wow. You're going to be as tall as Tensei soon." He beamed at the mention of his beloved brother. "I swear you look just like him at that age. I wish I could come around as often as back then," she mused. "No, I think Tenya is taller than Tensei was," Mrs. Ida chimed in. She walked over from the kitchen to pass both boys their crackers and juice for the afternoon. Then she smoothed over her son's hair. "But yeah, same picture stretched over a bigger canvas." She kissed his cheek and Tenya smiled. "I swear, you're like a copy machine. Both your boys look like male clones of you." Mrs. Ise teased. "Really? I think they look more like their dad. Maybe in the quirk and jawline, but everything else is you." Tenya seemed unfazed by the remarks, but some gears in Izuku's head started turning. Nobody had ever said he looked like his family before. But what? Is that bad? He imagined the bullies at school using that as an insult. It wasn't as bad as calling him useless or ugly, but it didn't feel good either. Mrs. Ida and her friend used Tenya looking like his family as a compliment. Not even that they looked good, just alike. Izuku didn't understand. "And who's this?" the woman interrupted his train of thought. He tensed up immediately. She looked him right in the eyes. Most strangers who made eye contact for that long were paparazzi. Or worse, villains. He gulped. "I see," he mumbled, dropping his nerve to gaze at his feet and twiddle his feathers. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I scare you?" she asked, stepping back. "It's okay, he's shy," Mrs. Ida stepped in. "You boys can go start your homework. Don't let us keep you." She gently nudged Tenya back towards Izuku. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to their guest. "Thank you for visiting, Mrs. A," he declared with a deep bow that further exposed Izuku. "Great to see you again." Both boys bowed again and took off up the stairs. As they left, Izuku overheard a whisper. "Holy crap, was that All Might's angel?" And his stomach sank. The feeling got deeper once they reached Tenya's room. He'd been there plenty of times before. The light blue walls lined with books and glasses had been a second home for years. But something had been there the whole time that Izuku only just now paid attention to: the family pictures. The Idas were a big and close-knit group, so there were a lot. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins lines a series of bulletin boards on the right wall among numerous shots of Tenya's parents and brother. Especially his brother. Mrs. Ida and her friend were right, they looked exactly alike. Same dark straight hair on top of a squared head on broad shoulders. And they looked like a perfect split of their parents, whose features could be seen in the grandparents, which spread down back into the aunts, uncles, and cousins. And the photos didn't show the family engine quirk. An unbroken line connected the whole family. Izuku considered his own family at 3 people, for if you counted Grandma Nana who passed away long before he was born, it was much smaller than the Ida clan. Izuku vaguely remembered asking Dad about it, and he said that families come in different shapes and sizes and that's okay. But so different from one another? Kids at school whose parents he'd seen had similar hair or quirks, and so did all the families on TV. Izuku had gray feathered wings and a round face. Dad was blonde with a square face and a super strength quirk. Gran had gray hair and rounded face with air jets. That's like me, right? I have gray hair. But it's way darker and it's feathers anyway, and Gran still had light gray hair when he was young. A squared face too. And his quirk has nothing to do with Dad's. Maybe since they can both make wind? What about Grandma? He tried to remember the few pictures they had of her. She had dark hair, I know that, but no wings or feathers. Nobody but me has feathers. What was her quirk again? I think Dad said strength, but I don't know. Izuku. The only thing that doesn't fit. Izuku. Tenya pulled him from his daze. What's wrong? Huh. You're crying. Oh heh. He wiped his face on his sleeve. It's fine. I'm always crying, don't worry about it, he said through hiccups. Tenya passed him the tissue box. You don't cry that much, he assured. Is something the matter? If you aren't feeling well, my mother can call Dash. It's fine, let's just do our homework. Izuku pulled out his textbook more forcefully than necessary. He felt Tenya trying to read him. You want to do math or reading first? Our reading, Tenya spoke hesitantly. You're better at it than me, so I would feel better with your help before you have to go home. His normal enthusiasm crept back in at the end. Okay. The sinking feeling remained. He didn't take the train anymore. Ever since the paparazzi figured out which station Izuku used before getting home, Dad got a self-driving car to take him places. Sir Night Eye, Dad's sidekick, escorted him home most nights. Izuku liked him. The man treated the boy with the same business formality as he did all the people Izuku saw him talk to at Dad's agency, which made him feel like an important grown-up. And he snuck him sweets. How was school? Did you learn anything of interest? He asked as Izuku strapped himself in. We started learning about the water cycle in science, he answered softly. A piece of candy appeared in the space in between the two. Izuku sneakily took it and put it in his pocket for later. A fine foundation for respecting our environment. Night Eye retrieved his laptop from the seat pocket and began tapping away. Someone wise once said that all of human history and civilization has been at the mercy of the rain and a few inches of topsoil. Izuku tilted his head. I am referring to farming. Animals have to constantly forage for their own meals to stay alive. Farming means a few can produce food for the many, so the many can put their energy into other T-dash. I think I get it, Izuku interrupted. The sun disappeared behind the buildings they drove past. And how was your visit with the Ida clan? Good. The sinking feeling came back. Maybe it would go away if he ignored it, like before. The car was small, but Izuku was tiny. He didn't need to scrunch himself up close to the window to fit. He wrapped his wings around his folded knees and resigned himself to watching the streetlights for the rest of the drive. Unfortunately, Night Eye didn't let him. It doesn't sound like you had a good time. Would you like to talk about it? Nothing happened. Izuku whined. Well, all right then. And he tapped away on the keyboard. Probably a report on Dad's villain fights of the day. Sometimes, Izuku would lean over to read along. He didn't usually understand at first, but Night Eye would explain something if he asked. That was how Izuku learned a lot of new, grown-up words. The sort of words the teachers might give him a sticker for using in homework, but other kids would tease him for using out loud. He wanted to watch, but a more pressing issue occupied his mind. Sir Night Eye? Yes. What's your family like? He hummed a moment. My parents are both managers at an ad firm, and my older sister is a food critic. They're fine people, I suppose. Though we're not as close as you and yours. We just don't have much in common. Another pause. Why dash? Do you look like them? The tapping stopped completely. Izuku watched the man raise his head from the screen and face the road. The sun was long gone, and the flash of streetlights didn't light up his face long enough to read him. Yes, he finally answered. I'm tall like my father, and my eye color and quirk are the same as my mother's. Izuku curled into himself tighter. Behind his wing, he bit down on his sleeve to keep from crying. Later, when he assumed Izuku wasn't looking, Night Eye sent a text. Izuku knew something was up as soon as he walked in the door and Dad greeted him with a hug. First of all, Dad almost never got home before Izuku. And when he did, he usually went to take Izuku home himself. Second, Gran didn't say anything. Gran always had something to say, which meant Dad told him not to say anything, which meant they were hiding something. The sinking feeling turned into a knot in Izuku's stomach. One that got bigger and tighter the longer he thought about it. By dinner, it was so big it blocked food from going all the way down. But it was also so heavy it weighed down the words he wanted to say. Finally, mercifully, Dad spoke up. Izuku, did something happen today? Night Eye texted you. Not an accusation per se. He couldn't really blame Night Eye for telling Dad something was up. It was his job to protect him after all. But he also felt it fair to feel a little betrayed. He pushed the peas on his plate around. Tenya and Tensei both look like their parents, Izuku forced out. Okay. Dad nodded along. Wrinkles Izuku hadn't noticed before folded over his brow. He waited for him to explain what he knew, but as always, Dad had him explain himself. I don't look like you, he whispered. Gran's fork scraped the plate with a skin-crawling screech. Izuku flinched. Dad didn't seem affected. You don't, but that's okay. Is it? No more than a squeak, almost the same pitch as the plate. Tears chased the sound. A fork dropped on the table. A second later, Dad's arms encircled him. He picked him up and held him against his chest. Even at Izuku's age, he was so small and his dad so big he could be held like a baby. Normally, it was his favorite place in the world. But Izuku didn't want comfort. He wanted answers. They came in the form of a video on a laptop. A newscast recording. The anchor described how All Might found a large egg in the alley behind his agency and looked after it for several months. Then, a shot of a human foot poking through a crack in the shell. Cut to All Might, Dad, holding a small baby to his costume-clad chest. Sound dropped out except for a name. Izuku. Dad pushed a notebook next to him. Izuku hadn't realized he left the room. The page showed diagrams of an egg at various stages of development, along with notes and dates. What? He asked his father. Dad sat beside him on the bed. I found you, abandoned behind the agency. Nobody would take you. Heh, a lot of people thought you were just a prank. Dad smiled, but dropped it when Izuku didn't respond. We put out a call, but no one claimed you. And by the time you hatched, well, he turned the page. Photos. The foot picture again. A little face in a green bundle. A giant hand bigger than the tiny baby it caressed. And in the corner, a list of crossed-out names, ending with a circled one. Izuku. I couldn't let you go. Izuku suddenly felt sick. Really sick. Not like throw up sick, but like he was going to collapse. Even worse, he didn't understand why. He choked on his tears as he curled up. Oh, Izuku, he tried to pull him into another hug. No. Izuku howled and pushed the giant arms away. Dad winced. They just stared at each other a moment. Fat tears flowed down Izuku's face, and Dad looked like he was trying not to follow. He kept his arms raised. That went on a little longer. Dad broke the silence. I love you, son. Wordlessly, Izuku hopped off Dad's bed and ran to his room. He jumped into bed and sobbed his heart out. Shaking, he searched for his blanket, but shuddered when he realized it was the same from the picture. He tossed it aside but regretted it right away. It sat in a heap on the floor. He could just go get it but also couldn't. It didn't make sense. He wasn't in trouble. No one was mean to him. Nothing bad happened. But he felt like his feelings were going to swallow him up until he couldn't breathe. Dad lied to him. About who he was and where he came from. That was important. That mattered. What else was a lie? Izuku felt lonely and suffocated all at the same time. He'd never felt anything like it. Betrayal maybe? Despair? All he knew was that he was so sick it hurt. Izuku. He didn't respond. I love you. I always will, no matter what. You're my son. You're mine. You're mine, Dad cried. Izuku listened as he walked back to his room. The breakdown lasted until late into the night. Izuku pulled himself together enough to change into his pajamas and go brush his teeth. As he stared into the mirror, he tried to picture people who looked like him. Adults, parents even, with dark feathered wings and round faces. But all he could picture was Dad and Gran as they were. The really bad feelings went away a while ago, but he still felt sick. Izuku stepped out into the hall. On one end, Dad left his bedroom light on. On the opposite, so had Gran. An open invitation to talk some more or sleep in their beds like he did when he had nightmares. Izuku stood in the hall a moment, before going back to his own room. Dad told me I'm adopted last night. That's why we don't look alike, Izuku confessed to Tenya the next day at lunch. His friend responded with only a bewildered expression at first, partly because his mouth was full. That's interesting, he said cautiously. Only then did Izuku remember he never told Tenya about his realization the day before. The stuff your mom and her friends said yesterday made me realize that I don't look like anyone in my family, Izuku clarified. When I asked, Dad said it's because I'm adopted. He found me in an alley when I was an egg. You mean you didn't know? You knew? Izuku yelled. Some kids at other tables looked at them. Izuku, please keep your voice down. I understand that you're upset, but that's no reason to shout indoors, Tenya reprimanded with accompanying hand chops. Izuku closed his lips tight, but kept his eyes focused accusingly his friend. Why didn't you say anything? He whispered. I assumed you knew, he responded at a normal volume, which for him meant loud. Izuku couldn't keep his head feathers from prickling in frustration. Tenya noticed, and immediately launched into an explanation. My parents told me about you a long time ago. It was a big media story back then. They said everyone knew about you, and I thought that included you. Izuku deflated. This whole time, I was the only one who didn't know? He scanned the room. The bullies. The nice kids. The kids who ignored him. Even the teachers. Probably every stranger on the street. Everyone knew. They knew more about him than he knew himself. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. And nobody seemed to care. Here he was, feeling lost and confused. A truth he never questioned suddenly shattered, leaving him to drift through a sea of emotions he couldn't name. But what was a life-altering revelation to Izuku was common knowledge to everyone around him. A tear dripped into his soup. I deeply apologize. I wasn't aware of the full situation, but that doesn't excuse me from belittling your situation. Tenya babbled. But if I may... Izuku side-eyed him. Does this new information actually change anything? What? No masking his annoyance. Blood-related or not, your father and grandfather still care for you, don't they? He began. Certainly, this reveal hasn't made you love them less. Izuku bit his lip. Has it? No, he admitted. He remembered how both of them kept their lights on late at night in case he wanted to talk. Izuku did still love them. And he believed they still loved him back. And yet, that heaviness in his heart persisted. The sense that something was wrong. Like he was in the wrong place, or he wasn't who he thought he was. Who he was supposed to be. However, at 9 years old, Izuku didn't have the clarity to convey those feelings. But I still feel weird. He didn't touch his lunch. Later that day, Izuku did something he'd never done before. Lie to his best friend. Gran's gonna be here to pick me up in a bit. You go on ahead, he told Tenya. The school day ended. Izuku took his time getting his shoes on while other kids swarmed around him. He tucked his wings painfully close to his back to take up as little room as possible. Really? Usually he or your father lets my mother know beforehand, he questioned. Tenya was already good to leave, punctual as always. I'm sorry, it's kind of a last-minute thing, he hung his head. Izuku was way out of practice when it came to lying, but Tenya had zero game in detecting it. Okay then, I'll see you tomorrow. He waved as he left. Izuku stayed where he was on the ground until his best friend was out of sight. He wasn't made at Tenya. A little miffed at his reaction to the situation, but not mad. And he wasn't avoiding him. He just needed some space. The plan was simple: hang out in the area until he got tired or around after the Ida's dinner time, whichever came first, then go to the usual spot where Night Eye picked him up. Nobody had to know. Until then, Izuku got to be alone for once. He set off. Izuku was shorter than most kids, so he easily hid behind groups of students away from the eyes of teachers. There wasn't anything weird about kids walking home, but there was something weird about him walking home. Dad didn't like him being by himself. If Izuku wanted to go somewhere, he had to go with his family or Night Eye or Tenya. If it was someplace new, he had to go with Dad or Gran to get a feel for the place. Make sure it's safe, as they'd say. They wouldn't even leave him home alone very long. He had to stay with the Idas or Night Eye if both Gran and Dad were gone for more than 2 hours. They said it was for safety. A child by themselves was risky enough, but the well-known son of the symbol of peace was a target for both media harassment and villains. But the more kids around him got the freedom to go wherever, the more unfair it felt. Izuku broke away from the crowd. He followed a little way up the road. High fences and hedges hid large fancy houses. When he passed holes in the fences, he stopped to admire the pretty buildings. Pure white concrete cubism sat next door to vine-covered cabins. No two looked alike. When he asked Dad why they had an apartment instead of a house, he said he preferred living deep in the city, where all the action is, and that they didn't need that much space to be comfortable. They were far from the mansions that hosted charity events Dad took him to sometimes, but the houses were still obviously expensive. He hadn't been down this street before. But the unfamiliarity didn't faze him. There's nothing to be worried about, he reasoned. Lots of pro-heroes live in the area. That's why Dad said he chose my school. It's one of the safest places for kids in the country. And it wasn't like he was waving a sign around saying he was the son of All Might. His rain jacket, by design, was big enough to comfortably hide his wings. And his head feathers looked like hair unless someone got close. No way a stranger could pick him out of a crowd. Just a couple hours won't hurt. The sidewalk ran past a small park. A playground beside some tennis courts stood at the edge of some woods. Empty. Perfect. Izuku went straight for the playground. A plastic yellow tube connected 2 wooden structures. He cast off his rain jacket and stretched his wings before climbing in to lay down on his stomach. They were about as long as he was tall now. Maybe longer. He popped Night Eye's candy from yesterday into his mouth and rested his chin on folded arms. Maybe that's why I'm so short. All my growth goes into them instead of the rest of me. All he could see were the woods ahead. They weren't actually woods, he realized, considering he could faintly see buildings and sky on the other side through them. Idly, he wondered if the people who built the neighborhood planted the trees, or if they were leftovers from the real woods they cleared. Traffic from the main road faded behind the sound of wind through leaves. Izuku sighed. It's not that I don't want to be around Tenya or my family, he told himself again. I just need space to figure things out. Figure what out? He shifted his wings. I'm adopted. Dad's not my real dad. What does that mean? Does it have to mean something? He sniffed. Of course it does. I wouldn't be feeling all weird if it didn't mean something. Izuku scratched the back of his head and came away with a small feather. With each new molt, his feathers got darker and curlier. On his head especially. He turned it over between his fingers. Dad found me in an alley. In the trash, a harsher part of his brain mocked. He shoved it aside. But what was I doing there? He'd seen movies where pets got left on the street when their owners couldn't take care of them anymore. Or didn't want them. Is that what happened? My real family didn't want me? A voice in his head that sounded like the bullies at school said they knew before you were even born how useless you would be. Izuku wiped his nose. No way. I was an egg. Dad's notes said he could only see spots when he held a light up back then. They couldn't tell. So does that mean they just couldn't take care of me? Would they have kept me otherwise? Did they want me? Maybe, a deep voice answered from behind. Izuku froze. He hadn't realized he'd been talking out loud. Slowly, he turned his head to look. He didn't get the chance. But I know some folks who for sure do. Large hands yanked him backwards by the legs. Izuku cried out. A kick to the head cut him short. The world went dark. But, you idiots! Izuku jolted awake. Everything was dark. His head hurt. What are you complaining about, boss? Jealous we landed the score of the century before you could? Or you just mad we're gonna get enough tonight to buy you out? The deep voice from before. Izuku's eyes adjusted. He was in a metal dog crate covered by a dark red sheet. His clothes were different. Tight brown fabric like old pajamas replaced his school uniform. Carnival music played in the distance. No, you simpletons. You familiar with the phrase, big fish sink ships? Nah. Thought it was loose lips? Not in this business, the boss raged. Izuku's cage jostled. He covered his mouth with both hands. We stock in strong kids nobody cares about. That's how we make a profit and stay hidden. A glass shattered. Izuku buried his face in his knees and draped his wings over himself. You, smooth-brained, bring in the most famous child in the country? Maybe the world? Another crash, followed by the rattling of chains. A child who, I remind you, is famous for how powerful his father is. And you brought him to the center of our operations. A pause for panting. Izuku shook with terror. You just sprung not only a massive leak in our boat, but dropped enough blood in the water to attract every shark in the goddamn ocean. Every hero, every villain, is going to come for us. For him. He smacked Izuku's cage. In that moment, it truly sunk in what happened to him. A villain kidnapped him. Because he ran away by himself. He inhaled on a sob. The sheet lifted. Izuku held his breath until it dropped. He's awake. The boss emphasized every syllable. You need to get rid of him right the F now. Ain't that what we here to do? Dump our stock, the deep voice offered. The boss growled, but he cut him off. He's what I say, we sell the kid tonight, then take the money and run. Yeah, boss, it ain't like this is your only dance hall, the third agreed. And just think, the deep voice continued, so word does get out we got All Might's kid. We caught him in fair condition with no trace left behind, and had him up the same day. That's a sales pitch if I ever heard one. Footsteps tapped around just outside the cage. They didn't sound like shoes or bare feet. Speaks to the quality of our stock and catchers, i.e. me, and no promo means that FOMO will kick in, and customers will come straight to every sale to see what we got. Competition who? A crowd cheered faintly with the music. Sounds like our cue boss. What do ya say? Third finished. Izuku started hyperventilating. Tiesuke. Fine. The boss relented. But if this goes south, you'll both be taking the short walk. He stomped away and slammed a door. Suddenly, the sheet lifted again. Rise and shine, angel. Izuku ventured a look at the deep-voiced man. And gasped. A long black beak eased into the now open cage. Small half-circle fins adorned the top and bottom towards the end. Needle-shaped, interlocking teeth poked out from the smiling mouth between them. Tiny spines decorated his thin head, from which almost glowing yellow eyes pierced through him. Ha! Hot breath smacked Izuku in the face. The jaw it came out of opened wide enough to fit his whole head. Izuku retreated to the back corner with a whimper. Son of the symbol my butt. A long, thin, clawed hand reached for him. One finger folded back into a long sail of red-striped, blackish-purple skin. Izuku, paralyzed with fear, did nothing to fight him. The man pulled him out into what looked like a dingy storage room. Boxes dominated every inch illuminated by the single dim ceiling light. The third, a skinny man with sickly pale skin, bound Izuku's shaking hands, before wrapping them up in red ribbon. He even tied a bow. Please let me go home. I just want my dad. He screamed inside. Outside, he could only cry. None of that, third spoke. He tapped Izuku's forehead, and his sobs immediately stopped. All the emotions were still there to drown him, but he couldn't move his face. The man dabbed his tears away with a rag. Gotta look nice and pretty for your new mommy and daddy. Huh, he managed to force past his numb lips. They ignored him. Showtime, the deep-voiced bird man declared. Only he wasn't a bird. Seeing him in the light, he didn't have any feathers, but the long skin from his hands were long, leathery wings. A pterosaur. He led Izuku by the ribbon on his hands like a leash through a bright doorway. He had an arrow tail and claws on his feet. Lights blinded him, and a wall of sound blasted his ears. Applause and janky happy music, like the circus in old movies or a game show. Izuku cracked open an eye. Warm spotlights made it hard to see, but he saw the shapes of people. Lots of them. But off. Masks, he whispered. Every face in the crowd was a fake one. And they rested lower than him. A stage. They're gonna sell me. To ladies, gentlemen, and those who know better, the deep-voiced dinosaur man crooned. The crowd died down. Third took the leash. You may have seen a little news update earlier. Immediate whispers. What you see before you is the genuine article. The son of the symbol of peace. All Might Jr. himself. Yagi Izuku, available tonight only. His name felt foreign in that horrible voice. Izuku felt like he was outside his body, watching himself stand there. The winged man listed off things like his weight and height, followed by stuff about his quirk. He didn't hear. Only existed. Dad? He thought of all the pictures of Dad holding him. Of the light at the end of the hallway. Waiting for him. He should have gone in. Turn around, Angel, he asked, almost kindly. Izuku looked up at him blankly. His beak had red stripes too. Go on. Show these nice people your pretty little wings. No one's ever called them pretty before. He did as he was told, spinning on one heel to face the back wall, before spreading his wings. The crowd applauded. Izuku still couldn't move his face. But if he could, he would scream. Someone else screamed. In another room, but loud enough that Deep Voice and Third paused their pitch. A door opened in the back of the theater behind Izuku. Hey, you can't dash. A squelch and crunch. Followed by more screaming. More horrible, unnatural sounds. Frozen, Izuku racked his brain for anything to compare what he heard behind him to, but came up empty. Deep Voice and Third flinched, but stopped. They were even more stuck than he was. He could at least turn his head. The screaming went silent after only a few seconds. Footsteps, very nice business shoes, soon joined the game show music. They stepped up on the stage, mere feet from Izuku. Which one of you caught him? The new voice, a man's without any distinct quirk or accent, asked Izuku's captors. Third wasted no time. He did it. He did I dash. Squelch. Third fell backwards into Izuku's line of sight. The moment he hit the floor, his body collapsed into bloody slices. His eyes still moved. Izuku inhaled sharply, but still couldn't scream. His whole body quaked. His knees felt as though they'd give out. But he couldn't tear his eyes away from the pile of gore. Not until a figure walked up to Deep Voice in the corner of his eye. A tall man with white hair and a fancy suit sauntered up to the terrified pterosaur and put a hand on his shoulder. He smiled. You work for me now. The white-haired man lowered himself in front of Izuku. Hello, little one. No need to be frightened, I'm a friend of your father. Despite his words, his tone and smile were very frightening. Like the kids at school who pretended to be his friend before they played a mean prank or tried to steal his feathers. But this was an adult. Why are a stranger? Izuku mumbled back. Dad and Gran drilled stranger danger into his brain since he was a baby. He had the sinking feeling that wouldn't help him now. The man chuckled. It echoed through the silent stage. Izuku tried to turn towards the crowd, but cold fingers lightly caressed his chin. No, nothing back there. He looked over his shoulder to the pterosaur villain, who stood stock still. Kuramoto Orochi, was it? He tensed. The boogeyman, you call yourself? Do you know who I am? You're all for one, he swallowed. Last of the first. Japan's emperor behind closed doors. The emperor behind closed doors? That's a new one, I think. I rather like it, he said, turning back to Izuku. And I can tell from the look on your face, those words mean nothing to you. He sounded almost disappointed. But his creepy smile returned in an instant. No matter. We'll have plenty of time to get acquainted. The bindings around Izuku's wrist hardened and shattered like glass. Come. Izuku collapsed like a rag doll into his arms. The man, all for one, was large enough that being in his arms almost felt like Dad. He even held him to his chest and patted his back like Dad did. He didn't feel safe though. Not at all. They passed through a swirling black cloud into a dark hallway. I of course know you, little Izuku. You're quite the celebrity, he began. He carefully tucked one of Izuku's wings closer to his back so it didn't hang loose. Like the rest of the world, I watched with rapt attention as the symbol of peace dedicated a portion of his life to caring for an inconsequential little egg. I admit, more out of fascinated pity than anything noble. I imagine it's the same impulse that drives others to watch terrible reality television about impoverished, dysfunctional lunatics. He shook his head. Train wrecks in slow motion you just can't turn away from. Surely not even he is this pathetic, I told myself on more than one occasion. He huffed to himself. Imagine my shock when a real human baby popped out. There is honestly something so wonderful about there still being things out in the world to surprise you even. After 261 years. The hallway kept going. The boogeyman's clawed feet clicked against the tile behind them. Slowly, lightly. He was scared too. I have been thinking about what to do with you for the better part of a decade, all for one continued. Simply killing you felt too trivial. But I could not ignore his arrogance. His belief that he could succeed where even his beloved master could not. They stopped in front of a window into an illuminated room. A boy with gray hair, maybe a little older than Izuku, sat curled up in front of a video game. The only thing in the clean white room besides a bed. Shimura Nana managed to keep her son away from me until he was an adult, and I was more than willing to extend that patience to you, little Izuku. He heard the smirk in his voice. But thanks to your little rebellious streak and our mutual friend here, we get to start early. This is all my fault. Izuku willed himself to struggle, but his limbs wouldn't listen. It was like one of those nightmares where he realized it's such, but couldn't do anything to fight back against the terror. Or wake up. Start on what? The boogeyman asked what he was thinking. All for one side wistfully. The dawn of a new era. A door slid open. A giant room, not as dark as the hall but not as bright as the boy's room. Izuku saw the bodies on the tables first. Grayish-green and completely still. Some had wires and tubs stuck to them. One's brain stuck out of their head. A whimper escaped his throat. All for one shifted his hold as he kept going. Whoa, no way. The winged villain's composure cracked. I am not about to lay down and let you make me a Frankenstein or some sheet. I am way more valuable in one piece, I can prove it. Oh, don't worry, I'm aware. All for one reassured him the way Izuku's teachers did when they lied and said they would do something about the kids who were mean to him. Kurogyri. The black mist from before reappeared. It grew glowing yellow eyes and a suit. Please escort our new friend to orientation. Yes, sir, the cloud man responded blankly. Right this way. Farewell, all for one cooed, waving Izuku's numb arm at him like a baby. He led the boogeyman out of Izuku's line of sight. As for you, he hugged him tighter. Oh, the possibilities. Let me go. Never before nor since would Izuku ever feel so trapped in his own skin. His brain went wild trying to break free from his frozen body. He couldn't even control his own breathing. Where's Dad? I want Dad. They approached a table. A man laid there, pale and naked save for an uncountable number of wires inserted into a hole in his chest. Izuku swore he saw his exposed brain twitch. A scream died in his throat. I know it's not the most pleasing thing to look at, but good art takes time. And often, it's only in the final moments that the true beauty of the piece comes together, the villain meandered. It's taken myself and my associates decades to reach even this point, and I worry we may be in for a few more given our recent stall. Izuku felt his posture shift around him. Your father has assured none of our ventures make progress in a timely manner. He hummed to himself. How fitting that his son will help us make the next leap. For once, Izuku wished he could go into a nightmare. Just pass out and let whatever terrors his brain could come up with run him down through unconsciousness. Anything to get away from this monster in reality. Our Nomu are the soldiers of the future. Humans constructed of multiple quirks and DNA. They moved away from the man on the table, past a wall of 7 other people chained up tight. They didn't move either. Multiple quirks? That's impossible, Izuku thought. These are just prototypes, of course, just a fraction of the potential. However, not all quirks play nice with one another, and it takes so long to find workable combinations. Not far away sat a pile of people. All for one quickly turned Izuku away from them. Even then, those combinations cannot be replicated exactly. Each one is totally unique. While there is a certain charm to that feature, an almost artisan handmade quality, at the end of the day we do have a goal in mind. And that goal requires numbers we just aren't capable of creating in a timely manner at this stage. He wants to take over the world, Izuku realized. That's what all the bad guys on TV who make armies want. Can Dad fight a whole army? All for one took him up some stairs into a little room overlooking the bigger one. Papers and books covered every flat surface. Another door on the back wall spoke of an even larger building beyond it. What else is he hiding back there? He put him down on a squishy velvet chair. Izuku still couldn't move. What do I have to do with it? We've tried the old-fashioned way of replicating genes, but that takes a great deal of time and resources, especially if we want to keep our carriers in a controlled environment. All for one stepped away, revealing a diagram of a PRGNT woman attached to wires on the wall. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. The results were less than ideal anyways. But a hand rested on his back, between his wings. With your DNA, we may be able to replicate the circumstances of your birth. Eggs would be far simpler to manage en masse, wouldn't you agree? He whined again. Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of, little one, all for one said softly. He moved Izuku so he was sitting up straight and crouched before him. Just the occasional blood sample, maybe some marrow, and in between you can have whatever you like. Games, toys, ice cream every day. You'll never want to leave. His smile looked wrong. Not just fake, but really fake. Like it was painted on sloppily, or like the old robots at theme parks. I want to leave. I want Dad. He felt like a toddler again. Like his first day of daycare. Stuck in a place full of strangers who claimed they wanted to help him, while he silently cried to go home to Dad. But that, of course, assumes your unusual origins are the result of a quirk at all. A picture appeared on a monitor behind him. A detailed black and white drawing full of people with wings. The really old kind that looked like the sort of thing from a long time ago that would be in a museum. They flew through the clouds, but clustered far too close together to get anywhere. Like the pile of bodies in the other room. What do you know of angels, little one? Movement returned to Izuku's mouth. I think there was hero with that name in one of Dad's comic books. And the villain with wings called me that. He didn't want to say anything. Dad's warnings about never talking to villains, even about simple things, rang through his mind. But something drew the words out. A force. A quirk? But I thought his quirk was making it so I couldn't move? But the stage, all those people? And the people on the tables? He has more than one too. Izuku swallowed painfully. Comic books. He sighed, then went silent for a bit. Why am I not surprised? But no. Didn't you wonder what angel was named after? Izuku shook his head without meaning to. Angels were a race of legendary beings who served under God, with the purpose of protecting and guiding those mortals who worshipped him. They've appeared in religious texts and art from the Middle East and Europe since ancient times. But I thought people didn't have quirks back then? All for one laughed hard. No, they did not, my boy. Izuku winced in disgust. Only Dad called him that. I haven't laughed like that in a good while. I must thank you, little Izuku. A giant hand came down to pat his head. Had Izuku been able to move, he would have bitten it. Angels were not mere people with quirks, but supernatural beings. Emissaries of a world beyond our own. Power. Beyond our comprehension. He said, power, the way a starving man would describe a feast. And after a moment, he looked at Izuku in much the same way. There are some who believe you to be such a creature, little Izuku. What? I don't understand. All for one reached over to caress his wing, and every feather shivered in disgust. He retracted his hand deliberately. I haven't found much to corroborate this admittedly far-fetched theory, and it would be dishonest to say I didn't carry doubt. However, A knock came from the door in the back. All for One patted his knees and stood. He squeezed Izuku's chin before he went to answer it. Like I said before, I've seen a lot of things in 200 years, and yet, there's always been something new to surprise me. The door opened. A crunch, then All for One flew back into the window. Papers swirled everywhere. The quirk holding Izuku lifted. He jumped up and turned around. Dad, eyes blazing and fists bloody, took up the whole doorframe. The walls of the hall behind him were cracked. Steam rolled off his clenched muscles. He looked way scarier than on TV. But it was still him. Dad! Izuku! His face softened just a moment. And in that moment, all the paper in the air launched towards him. The flurry knocked Izuku off the chair. Dozens of little cuts burned against the air. He tried to block them with his wings. Wind blasted them all away. Large arms scooped Izuku up. "I'm here," Dad whispered. Before Izuku could react, All for One blasted them with whining purple light. Dad used his body to shield him, before swinging around to backhand the villain in the jaw. The force kicked up more papers and blew the glass out of the windows. Through them, pulsing flesh lunged at Dad's head. He ducked, but they slammed down on him. Dad fell to the floor. His body arched in a roof over Izuku. He felt the hit reverberate through his chest. He clung to Dad's hero costume, only then realizing the tears in his eyes. Through the blur in the corner of his vision, wriggling, fleshy tentacles spread across the floor towards them. "Dad, get up," he called. "Best you don't, Dad," All for One mocked. The air crackled with electricity. The advancing flesh got closer. Dad raised his arm. Just long enough for Izuku to see All for One's body stretch and morph against his suit. Then, Dad smashed his fist into the floor. Tile shattered. Everything in the room not nailed down slammed into the walls. The whole thing came free from its foundation and crashed down into the warehouse below. Dad jumped out a window at the last second. Gran flew in from the new hole in the ceiling. "You idiot!" Jumping in here alone without dash, he stopped when he saw Izuku. "Take him," Dad ordered. He had to rip Izuku's hands off his costume. "We don't have time." "Grandpa," Izuku cried. He buried his face in his neck the instant he held him. "Hey, Omelette," he breathed a sigh of relief. It didn't last. The lights turned red. A siren pierced across the space. On the wall, the prototypes, the Nomus, came free from their chains. And with an ear-splitting creak of metal, All for One emerged from the wreckage. "Go!" Dad commanded. All for One slammed into his waiting counter so hard the ground shook. Gran stumbled a bit, before blasting into the air. They didn't get far. A Nomu sunk its crushing teeth into Gran's boot, and slammed him and Izuku back into the floor. It knocked the wind out of Izuku. Gran's own wind wasn't much better. He had to punch the Nomu's jaw to pieces before it let go of him, but by the time he did, his foot was clearly broken. So much so he didn't have the air power to fly both of them out. The other Nomu descended upon them. They all have more than one quirk. Izuku tried to warn. "I can see that, kid." He dodged a three-armed one, a different type of blade on each. One without bones in its spike-covered arms swung at him. Another with armored skin and moose antlers thrashed its head wildly. The rush of quirks and bodies moved so fast Izuku had trouble picking out one from the other. How could Gran do it? With 1 foot down and a child nearly as big as him to carry, he still managed to dodge and fight 7 genetically modified villains at once. A Nomu grabbed Gran's arm and fused its skin to his glove. He yanked his arm back, but the momentum took him right into a different Nomu's mouth. The bald dog-faced monster sunk deeper into his shoulder and ripped Gran off his feet. Without thinking, Izuku reached up and clawed at the villain's eye. Over and over, until blood burst forth and it released his grandpa. Hot liquid trailed down Izuku's arm. He wanted to throw up. A shockwave from Dad and All for One's fight threw them all back towards the wall. The concrete beneath them cratered. Blood coated the surface. This isn't like Dad and Gran's fights on TV, Izuku couldn't help but think. It's never this bad. This angry. He thought of the Hero News Hour they all watched together after dinner. The bright colors and smiles, and the worst piece of gore was maybe a broken tooth. Dad said the show picked and chose from cleaner outcomes, but Izuku never could have imagined something like this. Gran pulled himself up, panting heavily, and started moving again. The pack of Nomus weren't far behind. I bet he could fight better if he didn't have to worry about protecting me. He looked around. The door to the hallway all for one brought him through collapsed open. Maybe there's a way out. I can get out of the way and get help. Izuku struggled in Gran's grasp. Kid, let me go. You'll fight better without me. And you'll die without. He rolled under a jumping Nomu. Without me protecting you. Gran flipped away from the mass of bodies. Another shockwave messed up his landing. His grip loosened for just an instant, but it was enough for Izuku to push free. Izuku! Gran snapped at him. But he ran. No looking back. No matter how the sounds of angry cries and squelching flesh called him back. Izuku knew there was nothing he could do to help his family in a fight, not without a working quirk. At most, he could stay out of the way and maybe find more heroes. Izuku thought of Tenya as he ran. How he lied to his best friend to be alone, just to be kidnapped. All this really is my fault. I better apologize to him when this is over. And thank him for teaching me how to run. Not even worthless wings weighing him down could counteract lessons from a family of Japan's best runners. A laser beam cut the building above his head and brought down the roof. Izuku maneuvered around the debris like a pro. Broken concrete and shards of glass cut his bare feet. The pain drew up more tears, but it didn't stop him. He dove into the hall. Sirens replaced the blows and growls as the dominant noise. The flashing red lights revealed dozens of doors Izuku hadn't been able to see in the dark. He remembered the gray-haired boy. I gotta find him. He's a prisoner too. Dad and Gran don't know about him. The building shook again. There's probably not a lot of time. He recalled the window to the boy's room wasn't far from the entrance to the warehouse. Leaving bloody footprints behind, he jumped as he ran to see inside the different rooms. Boxes. Filing cabinets. Giant barrels. More Nomus chained up. Izuku nearly hit his head falling after that. But he finally found the boy's room. He didn't see him at first. For a moment, he worried another villain took him away. Then he saw toes just poking out into the light from under the bed. Izuku jumped and banged on the glass to get his attention. He needed to be ready to go once he got the door open. It was locked, of course. Izuku quickly plucked one of his larger feathers and jammed it into the keyhole. He had absolutely no idea how to pick a lock, but he saw a hero do it with her feather on TV once. It only took them a second, so it couldn't be that hard. Just as he was starting to get frustrated, the door fell forward. Yes. Izuku beamed. But he quickly realized the door wasn't his doing. The entire thing crumpled to dust as it fell out of the frame. The prisoner boy stood before it. He looked like even more of a mess up close. Taller and older than Izuku, maybe a teenager, but with greasy hair and a bunch of scars. And he was really skinny. He must have been there a long time. Come on, let's go. Izuku yelled, trying to reach for his hand. The boy flinched hard. What? Don't you want to get out of here? He grabbed at him again. We have to stick together. Don't. If I touch you, you'll be like the door, he warned. Izuku groaned exasperated. Then I'll hold your wrist. He did so. The boy stared at him wide-eyed. Another tremor. We have to move. The two ran back out into the hall. They reached a massive hole through both walls. Clearly someone got punched through. Neither led outside. Do you know how to get out? He asked the other captive. I haven't been outside in a while, he stammered. How long have you been here? Izuku led them through the broken opening past more halls and storerooms. I don't know. He looked around at the strange machines they passed in fear. It's been years. What's your name? Tamura, he answered unsure. I'm Izuku. He paused at a fork and randomly chose the furthest path to the right. Don't worry, Tamura. My dad's fighting the big bad right now. And he's all might. Nobody can beat High Dash. Gotcha. A tall, burly villain jumped from behind a corner and grabbed Izuku by the wing. He yanked him harshly into the air, breaking it. White-hot pain unlike anything Izuku had ever felt shot like a wave out from the brakes to the rest of his body. It pulsed over and over, Too fast and too slow at the same time. Between that and his own crying, he almost didn't hear the following conversation. "Head back to your room, kiddo. You ain't allowed to be out, remember?" the villain told him. But if the building is collapsing, does that look like my problem?" He bounced Izuku by his broken wing, laughing. "Remember, outside is my domain, and the boss said I can do whatever I want to you if I catch you out, sides killing you. Don't wanna end up like your little pal here, do ya?" He snapped another bone with just his thumb. Izuku's very soul cried out in agony. "Muscular, stop." Muscular pushed Tamura over with his foot. "What? Think you're special, 'cause you're the boss's favorite pet? Suddenly grow a conscience after killing all those critters? Coulda sworn there were some birds in there. What's your take with this little pest, eh?" A tremor sent pins and needles down Izuku's wing. Tears leaked into his mouth as he cried out sounds in the vague gesture of calling for Dad. "Be a good little pet and go back to your room until one of your handlers comes stika." Izuku hit the ground. He struggled to get his breathing under control through the pain. His heartbeat pumped aching misery over every inch of him. He couldn't stop crying. He wasn't the only one. "Izuku! Izuku!" Tamura pulled him up by his shirt. "Let's go." Tamura? "It's Tenko," he stated, before pulling Izuku onto his back. Izuku was too out of it to protest. They left a gory mess behind for the nearest wall. Tenko put his hands against it until it crumbled. He did it again and again, through shaking ground and falling debris, until they saw the sky. They stepped into an overground backlit surrounded by a chain-link fence. Nighttime. Izuku slid of Tenko's back as he paused to look at the sky. I think I can walk now," Izuku mumbled through the... His broken wing hung loosely behind him. Feathers dragged along the ground. His hurt-hazed mind could only think about how Gran would be mad he got them dirty. "Your quirk is cool." "Yeah." Just as Tenko went to disintegrate the fence, the building caved in. A second later, all for one floated out, chunks of metal and concrete orbiting around him. All might launched at him, knocking them both out of sight. A massive crash shook the ground yet again. "We gotta go. Now." Izuku chased after him. Around the corner, police and onlookers gathered at the edge of the fight. "They'll help us." Tenko cut him off. "No, they won't." He led Izuku down an empty alley. "We can't trust anyone besides. Master's people are everywhere." "Master? You mean that one-for-all guy?" Izuku questioned. "All for one, and he's not just some guy. And our only chance is a head start while the heroes distract him." They reached the next street. Tenko looked around wildly. "Do you know where you're going?" "No. I told you. I haven't been outside in years," he snapped. "Now shut up and look out." He grabbed Izuku's shirt just as a massive shadow swooped down. It did nothing but dissolve. Daggers dug into Izuku's shoulders. In the blink of an eye, he was 50 feet in the air and climbing. The wind buried Tenko's calls. "This is all your fault, you know." Izuku looked up to the distressingly familiar dark shape of a toothed beak. "Just tonight you got my business partner, the host of my favorite venue, a decent chunk of my customer base, and potentially my new business partners, all killed." They flew higher. The lights of buildings looked distant. Izuku screamed. The boogeyman dug his claws in deeper. "Shut up." In the distance, explosions and energy blasts erupted from what looked like a war zone. At least 3 blocks were leveled. Izuku thought he heard his dad yell. "Listen up, Angel," the flying villain hissed. "I am in a very precarious state of employment right now. And despite all the trouble you've caused, you're still the hot ticket item I need to either stay in His Majesty's good graces or re-establish my own business elsewhere. So I'm going to do you the favor of not letting gravity turn you into a baby hero pancake like you deserve. Get it?" He flipped his face down to look Izuku in the eyes. Burning yellow and dozens of teeth. Izuku hadn't stopped crying from his broken wing, but he held his tongue as best he could. Suddenly, while the boogeyman wasn't looking, something large and fast as a bullet slammed into him. He recoiled back, flapping extra hard to steady himself. It came back around. Gran! Izuku would have recognized his white and yellow blur anywhere. The old man, carefully maneuvering with a single jet stream, hit the dinosaur again before he had the chance to recover. Hard enough for him to lose his grip on Izuku. He dropped like a stone. "Gran?" he shrieked as he felt the world rise under him. The boogeyman desperately tried to regain his hold, but only managed to graze Izuku's head, leaving behind gashes down to the skull. Izuku tumbled through the air. Light spiraled incomprehensibly around him. His heart felt like it was always a few feet behind. He flapped his working wing uselessly. The wind burned his wounds. All he could do was scream, "I'm gonna die." Over and over. "I don't want to die. I want to go home. I want Dad." Then, as if answering his prayer, large warm arms encircled him. "Izuku! Dad!" The boogeyman, who had moved to catch him, couldn't stop in time. Dad grabbed the top of his beak and crushed it in his fist like cheap plastic. The villain cried out in horror as the top of his face fell rapidly to the ground. He dove after it. Izuku and Dad, meanwhile, descended to a different part of the battlefield. Not the most graceful landing, but Izuku couldn't care less. Dad was here. Everything was going to be okay. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I got mad. I'll never run away again." Dad put him down. "Huh." Dad looked tired. His face was covered in ash, and swollen from who knows how many hits. His costume had holes everywhere. He wasn't putting weight on one leg. But still he knelt down before Izuku. "Can we go home now?" Izuku asked earnestly. Dad frowned. He cupped Izuku's face in his hands, firmly, but not too tight. He bit his lip and stared deep into his eyes. A tear cleared through the dirt. Dad kissed his forehead. "I love you, Izuku." Then he covered Izuku's nose and mouth, holding him while he struggled, until the world went dark. Izuku woke up with a start. "What happened?" he asked the darkness. He squirmed in the tight space and realized he was stuck in a blanket. Dad used to wrap him up like that when he was little and they went on long plane trips. He'd flap his wings in his sleep sometimes, and Dad would wrap him up to keep him from hurting himself or bothering others. "Wait, Dad." Izuku thrashed against his bindings until one arm was loose enough to unwrap the rest of him. Newly freed, he took in his surroundings. Dark, save for a splinter of dull blue light. Izuku crawled towards it. He tapped the edge, and the roof of the little cave, a metal panel, slid forward. Dust kicked up. Izuku closed his eyes and waved it away, then finally looked outside. A wasteland. No people. No noise. No buildings or their lights in the distance. Nothing but dust and scattered piles of rubble as far as he could see, all tinted deep blue by the first light of morning. And that light also confirmed what texture made Izuku suspect. The banquette was Dad's cape. "Dad!" he cried desperately into the blue void. All the pain of his injuries came back at once as he tried to step out of his hiding place. Dad must have knocked me out and hid me before he went back to fight. Where is he?" Izuku sniffled. No crying. I've got to find Dad. Or Gran or someone. Anyone." His voice echoed. He felt ash blowing into the cuts on his head. His feathers dragged ditches in the dust. But he kept going. "Hello? Dad? It's me." He coughed. "How long have I been out?" "Dad." A noise. He froze and listened. The wind blew sand over metal. His own breathing took up so much space. "Izuku." Faint and distant, also muddled somehow, but there it was. "Dad." Izuku ran. He felt every individual particle of dust dig into his cut-up feet, but he ran. "Izuku?" Again. He changed direction, trying to get a fix on the sound. "I'm coming, Dad." It didn't fight the tears anymore. "Where are you?" "Izuku." That one sounded off. What if it's not him? Izuku stubbornly pushed the thought from his mind. It had to be Dad. Who else would it be? He weaved between broken pillars and pipes, crossed whole dunes of dust and ash, until he came to the edge of a massive crater. So big he couldn't quite get a read on how far it was. But it was for sure deep enough to bury a house. And at the bottom, a shape too rounded to be debris. "Dad!" Izuku shouted. The crater was also much steeper than it looked. 2 steps down and Izuku tumbled the rest of the way, inhaling the kicked-up dust and further disturbing his broken wing. "Ow," was all he could say when he finally stopped. "Izuku!" He looked up at the figure. And stopped. A giant body made of blood and ash, blue eyes glowing like a reanimated corpse. Costume nowhere to be seen. One arm hung by a tendon. An unidentifiable pile of churned flesh, this too coated in dust, poured from a gaping wound in its side. The way broken rubs hung from the top, it looked like a mouth. There was even more blood on the ground behind him. "Izuku," he slurred, what looked like a pound of blood oozing from his mouth. His eyes didn't look right at him. He reached out, but Izuku stepped back. "Dad?" he questioned cautiously. The undead man, Dad, smiled and sighed. "Come here," he breathed. "Come there, my boy." Blood that looked black in the low light fell into the sand. "Please come here," he begged, voice cracking and gurgling. Izuku broke down. He let out a strained cry that just barely resembled words, before rushing to his father's side. Dad picked him up in one arm and held him close, far away from the hole in his side. He nuzzled and kissed his son while the other hugged his neck and whimpered apologies. Somehow, Dad was the more coherent of the two. "It's all right, baby boy, it's all right. I'm here, I'm here. I love you. I love you to Dad." Some time later, the sun rose on a changed world. Dad looked like the people back in the lab. The pale men with tubes and wires sticking out everywhere. Izuku thought they brought him back there when he first saw him. Gran had to take him back outside to get him to stop crying. A month and several visits later, Izuku could be trusted to sit in the observation room alone. Dad hadn't moved an inch in that time. The doctor said he was in a coma so that he could get better. He doesn't look better, Izuku thought with his cheek pressed up to the glass. Most of his own injuries, slices all around from the flying paper and deep cuts on the bottom of his feet from running through glass, were patched up within days. Even his broken wing had gotten better, though recovery girl insisted better didn't mean fully healed. And then Gran just had his arm in a sling. How bad is he hurt really? His chest moved so slightly, Izuku could have been convinced he imagined it. "I wish they'd let me sit with him." Whenever Izuku got sick or hurt, Dad would sit with him. They'd watch movies or read books or just lay there and feel safe together. He put his hand on the back of his neck and tried to pretend it was Dad holding him. Of course, his hand was way too small. The first couple days in the hospital were hard without Dad. Tired, hurt, and scared with no one but strangers to try and comfort him, he barely slept or ate. He didn't believe the doctors when they said his dad and grandpa were recovering somewhere else. For all he knew, he was in another part of All for One's lab. It wasn't until Night Eye came by to back up the story 2 days in that Izuku started to calm down. The nurses took him to see Gran the day after. They even let him sleep over in Gran's bed. He felt better, but it wasn't the same. The door opened. "Izuku." He didn't look at Gran. "Time to go." With one final glance at Dad, Izuku got up and left without a word. "Same as always. Got any 4s? Go fish." Carefully, Tenko drew a card from the stack with just a finger and a thumb. He held the cards he already had without his pinky too, even though he had special gloves that covered his last 2 fingers. Force of habit maybe. "Got any 2s? He asked. Izuku handed one card over, and Tenko put the pair on the ground in front of him. "Aren't games supposed to be fun?" "Yeah, I'm sorry," Izuku sighed. Both boys put their cards down and leaned back a little. Izuku winced as a feather touched the floor wrong. His wing wasn't broken anymore, but it was still really sensitive. So much so he couldn't fold it all the way anymore. "Just try and remember to bring something besides cards next time." He leaned back further until he lied down on the carpet. Tenko had a more furnished long-term room at the hospital. Nice enough that it looked like a hotel room on the cheaper end of average. "What was the first thing you did when you got home?" "I laid in bed and cried, I guess," he responded. He hated being at home without Dad. And with him hurt, heroes like Gran and Night Eye had to work extra hard to fight villains. Which is why he was with Tenko most days. Not surprising. He scratched at his neck. Izuku nudged him with his foot to stop. Yeah, I know." He didn't have as many overt injuries as Izuku or Gran, but was severely malnourished and had something called severe quirk rejection, which the scratching was a symptom of. Izuku could put 2 and 2 together based on the name what was going on, even if Tenko didn't want to talk about it. What about today? Got anything planned? No, just going home. He laid on his stomach, wings blanketed over him. In truth, Gran had offered to invite Tenya over, but Izuku really didn't want to see him yet. Not after everything that happened. What do you want to do when you get out? Tenko paused a moment to think. I want to go to the arcade. Or go get a pizza. Why? He pet his head to the side. Tenko was trapped with villains for who knows how long, then stuck in a hospital for 3 months, and he just wanted a pizza? Izuku didn't get it. There was a mall near my house. Mom used to take us there sometimes after my big sister's soccer practice. We get pizza, then play at the arcade, he said somberly. Well, I don't know about the arcade, but if you ask, I'm sure Gran or someone could order some pizzicato dash. That's not the point. Tenko snapped. Izuku's feathers bristled in surprise. Master used to bring me pizza and games all the time. Whatever I wanted. But I want to go and get something for myself. He crossed his arms and resumed his position on the floor. You wouldn't get it. Izuku didn't. He tried though. Do you know why that villain did all that to you? He asked cautiously. Somehow, Tenko tensed up even more than before. You really don't know your place, do you? What place? Izuku whined. I'm just trying to help. He exhaled hard. He wanted to make me be a villain too. He lifted his hands above his face, then put one over top of it. But why? You don't seem like a bad guy. Neither did he. Tenko got up and sat on the windowsill. His breath fogged up the glass as he looked outside. Seem doesn't mean anything. Villains aren't a state of being or a type of person. Actions are what matter. He examined his hands once more. Izuku sat up and tried to see what he did. If there was something on them, he missed it. A person stays dead whether or not you smiled while you killed them. Izuku had nothing to say to that. Gran says Tenko's family is gone, Izuku relayed to his still unmoving dad. Honestly, he wasn't sure if Dad could hear him. They didn't let him go in the actual room. Doctors said he might get Dad sick or mess up the machines keeping him alive. The closest he could get was the other side of bulletproof glass. Well, actually, he didn't say anything. Not to me anyway. I heard him talking to the police. I think he said he knew his grandma. Izuku drew his feet up onto the chair. Did he mean Grandma Nana? Doesn't that make us cousins? Grandma Nana may as well have been one of the made-up heroes in Dad's comic books for all the connection Izuku had with her. He knew she was really good at her job and Dad loved her a lot, but not much else. That she had kids besides Dad was a surprise, though not as much as finding out Dad wasn't actually one of them. He was adopted. Like he adopted Izuku. He wasn't sure how to describe the feeling he got after finding out, but it was something. I mean, I guess I wouldn't mind if he came to stay with us, Izuku continued. Gran seems worried about what's gonna happen to him once he gets out of the hospital. And sure, he's kinda mean sometimes, but not as bad as the kids at school. He waved his hands in dismissal. He just says some not nice stuff. He's never hit me or grabbed at my feathers. And the stuff he says really isn't that mean, more rude than mean really. And the doctors and Gran say he's traumatized. That's a new word I learned. Trauma? Izuku usually liked new words. Learning in general. He had a separate notebook, kind of like his hero notes, where he'd write down new words and ideas, plus what they meant so he could memorize them for later. But he heard about trauma so much he never felt the need to write it down. Gran says it's like when something so bad happens to you that it hurts your brain, the same way getting hurt leaves cuts and stuff on your body. And it can make you act different. Tenko didn't say much, but what he did say implied his family died, and the villains held him captive for years. They only had Izuku for about an hour, and it was by far the worst thing that ever happened to him. Imagining that lasting years, and Izuku decided Tenko had every right to be rude sometimes. And he was full of scars. Izuku had scars too. When the boogeyman dropped him, he clawed his head really bad. 4 long, deep marks on his left side, 1 on his right. So deep they needed a bunch of stitches. Thick, Rough ridges divided his head feathers into sections. One sliced off the top of his ear. Izuku already thought he looked ugly with his messy gray feathers, but this was a whole new level. Heroes were supposed to look a certain way. Approachable. Friendly. Like they could calm you down during something scary, or be on billboards for clothes and stuff. Like Dad. Izuku had been to tons of hero events with Dad, and sure some of them had scars, but nothing big enough to wrap around their whole heads. And they got their scars in battle. Helping others or stopping villains. Izuku got his after being kidnapped a second time and dropped to his almost death. A permanent reminder of the kid with wings who couldn't fly. At 9 years old, he hadn't thought much about falling in love and having a future with someone else. Dad and Gran were both single, and they seemed fine. But his new appearance made that life track seem so much more unobtainable, and thus more upsetting he couldn't have it. The mere thought of what the bullies at school would say made him want to cry. I don't think I'm traumatized, though, Izuku assured Dad, whipping his eyes. I don't really feel all that different, and I don't think how I've acted has changed much. I'm fine now that it's over, and I'll be even better when, he trailed off. The lighting in the room changed. They moved. A hazy shadow tracked across the wall from the corner of Izuku's eye into Dad's room. Right over his bed. The shadow solidified. Izuku screamed. The next moments took place over a mere few seconds. A bright light flashed over and over, forcing the shadow back into a man. The rest of the lights outside Dad's room turned red. And ear-bleeding siren flooded the whole hospital just as guard heroes burst through the door, Gran among them. He scooped a frozen Izuku up in his arms and bolted into the hall. Just like at the villain lab, Izuku felt like a video game, seeing what was happening over his shoulder rather than through his own eyes. Crowds of nurses and patients stampeded through the hospital. Gran had to shift Izuku to a side hold so he could see past his wings. They nearly dragged on the floor, he was so short. Izuku worried someone might step on them, but for some reason he couldn't make them move. Before he knew it, they were outside. The siren still rang louder than the voices right next to Izuku's ears. Namely Gran and Night Eye, who passed him to the other. Izuku blinked. He was in the back seat of Night Eye's car, a firm hand on his shoulder. They drove away from the hospital. Izuku screamed. Where are we going? What happened to Dad? Yagi, Night Eye addressed him steadily. There was a man in there. He was. Words fell about into babbling sobs. He covered himself with his wings and gabbed at his head feathers. His skin scrawled when his fingers brushed against the stitches. Night Eye pulled his hands away and forced him to look at him. Yagi, pay attention. Night Eye had his own hero voice like Dad, but his was chilling instead of triumphant. What you just saw was an assassination attempt on your father. Do you know what that means? The last part sounded like a rushed afterthought. Someone was trying to kill him. His throat clenched. They didn't do it, did they? His voice creaked like screeching metal. The villain is in custody. Your father is fine, he stated matter-of-factly. How do you care now? I looked into your grandfather's future before we left. The doctor should be telling him right now that your father was unharmed. He pulled out his phone. We can expect a text from him any minute. For now, my instructions are to escort you home. The tightness in his voice betrayed his calm face. Is he lying? Izuku thought, horrified. What if he's just telling me this now to get me to stop crying? He's leaving it to Gran to tell me Dad's gone. Tears started up again. He screamed silently as his feathers rattled. The phone appeared right in front of his face. His blurred vision only just registered Gran's name on the screen. Izuku wiped his eyes on his sleeve and looked. He's fine. Security kicked in before the freak could do any damage. How's the kid? Would you like to reply? Night Eye asked, handing him the phone. Izuku just stared at the text. It didn't bring the relief it should have. His brain locked itself on the track that Dad was dead, and all this was a trick to get him to behave a little longer. He was never going to see him again, and that was that. A news notification popped up. Assassination attempt on hospitalized, All Might thwarted. Izuku tapped it. The article said exactly what Night Eye did. A villain snuck into Dad's room, but the hospital security and on-duty heroes stopped him before he could hurt anyone. But the article also mentioned that Izuku had been there, right there, and did nothing. Just like after he was kidnapped, and Dad came to rescue him. That's what got him hurt in the first place. Izuku realized not long after that maybe he was traumatized. The adults staved off the rest of the world's opinions of Izuku for as long as they could. There had always been a vocal minority of people who blamed everything they thought was wrong with all might on that stupid egg kid. But those people got way louder when news broke that the #1 hero was in a coma due to injuries from rescuing his son. The assassination attempt Izuku saw wasn't the last. Other heroes were brought in to serve as security, which meant fewer on the street to combat the immediate surge in villain activity. Threats All Might could handle in minutes took hours of struggle for even ranked heroes. And even if All Might did survive his wounds, the accepted rumor was that he was going to retire due to them. All because he went to rescue his kidnapped son. His son who wandered off by himself because he was a little upset. Those were the thoughts circling Izuku's head on the way to go see Dad wake up. He knew he should have been happy. Dad survived his wounds, and after 3 months, Izuku got to talk to him again. But it's my fault he ended up like that in the first place? He peered out the car window from behind his feathers. All because I overreacted to being adopted. I should be grateful. I could have been an orphan, but Dad's always been there for me. 3 months without him highlighted that fact. It was the longest time Izuku had ever spent without his father. He felt lost and aimless, even as the hospital rolled into sight. It wouldn't be the last time either. Dad was a hero. Any one of the many fights and rescues he got involved in daily could kill him. Izuku understood that now. And that he was only human. He was always getting older. Dad would die one day, and Izuku would be alone again. "Come on, omelet," Gran got his attention. Izuku slinked out of the car into the giant jacket his grandpa held up. The baggy, orange affront to fashion was nearly big enough to be one of Dad's, but its sole purpose was to hide Izuku's wings from onlookers. Gran disguise, on the other hand, was just an old cowboy hat and lack of mask. "Why don't you have to hide anything?" Izuku asked quietly. "Kid, there's this great thing called the Clark Kent principle. The press ain't looking for just any old man, they're looking for an old man in a mask," he explained, then sighed. "Ask your dad later, he can explain it better." They went in a side entrance reserved for heroes and their family. A chain-link fence separated the alley from the street. People in basic paparazzi clothes loitered on the other side. Word must have gotten out that the doctors started taking Dad off the sedatives. Security people rushed them in before they could notice. "He's been showing increasing levels of consciousness on and off since yesterday," the doctor told them as they made their way up the building. He turned to Izuku, who winced under his gaze. "He opened his eyes and looked around this morning. We think he was looking for you." He said it like it was a charming piece of small talk. Izuku swallowed. He focused on the floor, making sure he didn't step on the cracks between the tiles. When they reached the elevator, he squished himself into the corner. Dad's room was on the middle floor of the hospital's hero wing. Only accessible by a single elevator, it had no windows, no room nameplates, very few lights, and strange patterns in the floor, ceiling, and walls that looked like trap plates from a video game. It looked too much like the lab. Gran offered his hand. Izuku wrapped his arms around his waist. All the tubes were gone. They went past the glass side room Izuku usually stayed in, right to where Dad was. Gran guided him around the other side of the bed. His left arm was gone. Only a stump half the length to where his elbow would be with a black sock thing on it remained. Gran said it got hurt so bad the doctors had to remove it. Izuku remembered how it looked like it was falling off right after the fight, but in truth that whole scene felt like a dream. Part of Izuku had convinced himself it was. Especially since from the glass room, Izuku couldn't see Dad's left side. Or his missing lung and stomach for that matter. So seeing the stump for himself was a genuine shock. He buried his face in Gran's side again. "We gave him the last of the quirk treatment just before you got here. It might take him a little while to wake up fully, but he should be aware enough to hear and feel you," the doctor said. "Hit the button on the wall if there's anything wrong. Any more questions?" He looked at both of them in turn. Izuku kept hiding. Then I'll leave you to it. And he left. The room was still a moment. Then Gran sighed shakily and made his way closer to Dad's bed. He pulled up a chair and sunk heavily into it. He put a hand on Dad's shoulder. Izuku saw it shake slightly. Omelette, why don't you go around the other side and hold your dad's hand? He suggested. Izuku hesitated, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Gran didn't look up. You heard the doc, he can tell you're here. He's probably missed you as much as you've missed him. Izuku shuffled around the bed slowly. He felt like when he'd sneak into the kitchen to get a snack late at night after Dad told him not to. If he was too loud and woke him up, he'd get in trouble. But Dad waking up was the point. Why was he like this? He pulled up his own chair, the metal screeching loudly against the floor. Neither Gran nor Dad reacted. Izuku sat down. His chin barely rose above the top of the bed. Dad's hand rested at eye level. For some reason, Izuku's mind wandered back to the pictures and videos Dad had shown him of when he hatched. How he was so small, Dad only needed one hand to hold him. He was too big for that now. But Dad's remaining hand was still much bigger than his own. Izuku's fingers curled around large, calloused ones. The fingers that ripped doors off their hinged and punched villains into a crater to protect him. They were colder than they should be. Who would I be if Dad wasn't my dad? He wondered sadly. He'd seen orphanages and foster homes in movies and stuff. Kids being happy like that was rare. And in other stuff where adults wanted to have kids but couldn't, adoption hardly ever came up. But then they wouldn't really be mine, you know, they'd say. Izuku remembered one time a character said that, and Dad immediately turned the TV off. What an awful thing to say, he shouted. That was before Izuku found out he was adopted. The memory brought an unexpected shred of comfort. Dad said, "You're mine," to him all the time. He loved him. And Izuku doubting that caused all this. But what if... He bit his lip and shut his eyes. The only thing he felt was Dad's lower-than-normal warmth. What would Dad be if he wasn't my dad? He'd be awake with 2 arms for one. Izuku shook his head. Would he have had kids if I hadn't just shown up? Would he still have adopted, or would he have found someone to have kids with? He pulled up his knee to rest his chin on it. Briefly, he considered what he would do when he was an adult. The scars put finding a partner as a hard maybe. But do I even want them at all? Try as he might, Izuku couldn't imagine himself in Dad's position. Be that taking care of someone younger, or even being capable of loving someone as much as Dad seemed to love him. One didn't feel like a factor. Did Dad want kids? Did he want me? I know he does now, but... He yanked back his hand. A low groan reverberated through the room. Izuku and Gran's heads shot up in sync. Dad inhaled quickly, then shuddered painfully as he exhaled. He tried to move his head and neck to the side, but it looked painfully strained. "Take it easy," Gran whispered, rubbing his shoulders soothingly. He stood and bowed his head close to Dad's face. His breathing began to even out. "That's it, son." Almost too quiet for Izuku to hear. Suddenly, a painful whine that sounded nothing like Dad erupted from his lips. His fingers flexed as he tried to lift his hand. It moved outward, searching. Izuku," he breathed. "He's right here, don't worry." Gran looked across to him. Izuku sat frozen. "Aren't cha, boy?" He swallowed. "I'm here." Dad turned towards him, face twisted in pain and confusion. It what looked like a great effort, his eyes open. And his face softened into relief so palpable, Izuku felt it in his own chest. "Izuku, my boy," Dad reached out like his arm was made of lead. Sniffling, Izuku stepped into his embrace on autopilot. For some reason, he didn't want to, but he knew he had to. Like a sprung trap in slow motion, Dad tried to pull him the rest of the way onto the bed the instant they made contact. "My baby boy," he blubbered. Izuku crawled up the rest of the way. Careful not to disturb the wounds he couldn't see, he draped himself over Dad's chest, wrapping his arms under his neck and making his wings into a blanket. Dad smiled something far warmer than his hero smile. "My precious, precious boy," he repeated. Izuku felt his father's tears drip down to his arms. He cringed. Doesn't he realize how hurt he is? That his arm is gone? The arm he still had came up to caress the back of Izuku's head. It squeezed him down into his nuzzles and kisses. "How are you feeling?" You could practically hear Gran smiling. "A lot better," Dad slurred. I had a dream I was a prisoner here. I was working on an escape plan before you two showed up." He and Gran chuckled. Izuku hugged Dad's shoulders with his wings. "How about you?" "A couple scrapes mostly. Some worse than others." Dad's thumb traced the scars on his head. Izuku stiffened. Gran quickly added, "But we're all healed up now. All's left is you to worry about." The bed shifted. Izuku felt Dad's arm stump lift past his feathers. He sighed. "That's unfortunate," he said, like it was the most minor inconvenience in the world. Like he dropped a pen, or the store was out of his favorite food. Izuku wanted to scream. Dad smiled against his cheek, then kissed it yet again. "As long as you two are all right, I'll manage." He's not even mad. It was Izuku's turn to whine. "Oh, it's all right, I'm here," Dad cooed. He ran his fingers through his hair and pressed their foreheads together. "I'm here, baby." "That's what you said before. After the fight." Izuku shouted inside. "The fight you got in because I was too stupid to just accept something good. You're hurt and are gonna have to retire, and it's all my fault." A hiccup escaped his throat, but something kept him from sobbing. "I don't deserve to be your son." Izuku stared at the vocab word with a mix of despair and hatred. Vestigial, a structure that once had function that is retained even after evolution rendered it obsolete. The worksheet asked for examples. Probably looking for answers like the appendix or the extra joint sum. Quirkless people still had. But his mind wandered to the weight on his back. Sitting at the desk against the wall, they cast heavy shadows over his work that had to be mitigated with a bright desk lamp in the middle of the day. Even in those faint edges, he could see how one shadow didn't match the other. Someone knocked the door. "What?" Izuku called. "Hey," Dad said softly, pushing his way in. He held his head out in front of hunched shoulders. No prosthetic, and his remaining hand formed a loose fist near his chest. The posture of trying to look smaller and less imposing for when he wanted to tell Izuku something he didn't want to hear. Izuku's frown deepened. He closed his book and spun his chair towards Dad. "If you're busy, I can come back later." "It doesn't matter." "Izuku." He squeezed his shoulder. Izuku turned away. "What has gotten into you lately?" "Huh." He shrugged. Izuku really didn't want to have another one of these conversations. It seemed like they were one after another nonstop since he was kidnapped 3 years ago. About how things were going to change. About how Dad was getting sicker and how public perception was getting worse. All Izuku could ever do was sit there and listen while Dad described how the noose that was the rest of the world was tightening around them. As if knowing the hurt was coming ahead of time would soften the blow. Instead, it just made Izuku paranoid for how much worse things could get. A thumb wiped away tears he hadn't noticed were forming. Then Dad pulled Izuku's head closer to kiss his temple. Near the scars. "I know you're tired." "I am too," he liked his lips. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." They moved to Izuku's bed. The giant circular mattress was more than big enough for even Dad to lay comfortably. Even injured, Izuku's wings never stopped growing. Folded, they were as long as he was tall, and likely to keep getting bigger. The giant bed was a precaution. Dad sat across from him, legs crossed, with his arm atop them. His hand opened lazily facing up, as if waiting to join with another hand he didn't have. "I think," he began hesitantly. Dad's somber expression was a far cry from his posters on the wall behind him. With a deep breath, he pulled together his composure. "It's about time I retired." Izuku's heart skipped a beat. His first instinct was denial, quickly followed by the crushing realization that this was inevitable. But like with everything else, knowing it was coming didn't make it hurt less. Dad opened his arms. "Come here, my boy." Izuku crawled into his lap without a second thought. His fingers clutched Dad's shirt while his wings wrapped around his shoulders. A firm kiss pushed down his head. "It's all right. It's gonna be all right." Why now, though? Despite what everyone, the doctors, Night Eye and Gran, public speculation, said, Dad didn't retire. Just a few months after he woke up missing an arm, lung, and stomach, All Might went back out into the field. He did so for 3 years without issue. What changed? Well, he shifted Izuku in his lap. Without a stomach, it's hard to get all the calories I need. And hero work burns a lot of them. His chest rumbled with a hum as he searched for the words. At first I thought I found a sustainable balance. But villains have grown bolder knowing about my weakened state, and it's frankly more than I can keep up with. I may have already done too much to ever recover back to where I was before, he swallowed. Izuku felt his chest roll with the action. If I keep going much longer, I may not live much longer. He hugged the gasp out of him. You're dying? Izuku cried. No, absolutely not, he comforted in vain. That's why I'm retiring. Before the work can start killing me, Dad tried to rock Izuku with his one hand. But Izuku was too big and, as his son finally realized, his arm wasn't as big and strong as it once was. Then he whispered, I wanted you to be the first to know. When are you doing it? Izuku sniffled. I'm making the announcement next week, Wednesday. He kissed Izuku's head again. Then the plan is to ease out of the field over the next year. So the other heroes aren't swamped with all my work at once. And tell the villains to bide their time, he mumbled bitterly. Please don't, Dad sighed. It's going to be hard, I know. But there are hundreds of heroes in this prefecture alone. I'm not the end-all be-all. But you're the symbol of peace. The pillar of society. That's not just stuff on commercials, they talk about you in school. Another sigh. One pillar can't hold up a whole building forever. He tucked Izuku under his chin and laid back on the bed. If there's a disaster big enough, I'll still pitch in. But I need to save my strength for that. His fingers combed his feathers gently. The rise and fall of his chest was better at rocking him than his arm now. They had cuddled in this position for as far back as Izuku could remember, but that fact kept him from relaxing into the touch. And hey, bright side is I get to spend more time with you. Izuku cringed. What? You wouldn't have to save your strength if you hadn't waste dash. Do not finish that sentence. Again, his voice reverberated through his chest into Izuku's ear. What happened was not in any way your fault. And even if it was, I'd do it again if it meant keeping you safe. Do you know why? Because you're a hero? Because you're my son. And I love you, Dad strained. That's why I'm doing all this. I want to be here for you, watch you grow up. I can't do that if I give the rest of the world strength I just don't have any more. Please understand that. Okay. Izuku slid off Dad's chest and tucked himself into his side. The right side. The one that still had an arm. He stretched his wing over his body as not to touch the other stump. They stayed there quietly a while before Dad said something else. Do you want to stay home? The day of the announcement, I mean, he offered. I know you have trouble at school sometimes, Dash. I'll be fine. It was like the universe took pleasure in proving him wrong. Dad drove him to school that day, and the instant he was out of sight, anxiety took root deep in his bones. Every breath he took was strained and shaky. And it stayed that way throughout the morning. Izuku, what's wrong? Tenya asked before he even realized he was there. A testament to how distracted Izuku was. In the last 3 years, Tenya shot up over a foot while his body began to fill out into the box-shaped physique the rest of the men in his family had. 12 years old, and he was already starting to look like an adult. More so compared to Izuku, who still looked like a ratty toddler. He needed to lean down to talk to him. What happened? Be honest. It's fine. He didn't buy it for a second. He knew better now. He's making an announcement later. I'm worried about how it's going to go, Izuku relented quietly. He scanned for any eavesdroppers. The other kids didn't go for his feathers anymore, but they were always looking for something, words or faces, to sell to the media. A few looks lingered on him. Don't ask me what about. Okay? I won't then. He raised himself back to his full height and walked on just a bit stiffer than before. Tenya scanned the other students and steered Izuku towards the wall, shielding him from the crowd, like his own personal bodyguard. No one dared get close. A bitter half-joke about getting Dad to pay him died in Izuku's throat. Admittedly, Izuku preferred it that way. It's not like anyone wants to be my friend for real, he thought bitterly, almost dragging into the wall as he walked. The feather stealing didn't stop because his classmates suddenly grew a conscience. It stopped after the pictures of the wasteland that was once the warehouse district came out. Especially the crater. Izuku saw the line where the top of the ridge met the sky in his nightmares. Everyone else saw the dark stain in the sand at the bottom where a human being used to be. The single solitary kill on Dad's otherwise perfect hero record. That was what awaited people who hurt Izuku directly. At least while Dad was still active. What if they think Dad retiring means he can't protect me? What if the villains come back? People looked up when they entered the classroom. A handful lingered before returning to what they were doing before. His wings weighed him down. What if they come for me? Dad's press conference started at 11. 3 hours. Izuku turned off all the notifications on his phone. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Tenya do the same. But that didn't stop Izuku from watching the clock like it was going to attack him. The teacher came in. The lesson started. The minutes dragged on. Everything will be different. Izuku escaped the first wave of the kidnapping aftermath by virtue of isolation. For months, he lived either at home or at the hospital. Sometimes tenuous. But he caught glimpses. Headlines on magazines and newspapers in lobbies they rushed past. Snippets of newscasters and commentators before he entered the room. Even he didn't hate himself enough to seek out the worst of the worst after the fact. Back then anyway. No hiding from it this time. 11 o'clock came and went without a reaction. Izuku squeezed his fingers together under his desk. The seconds crawled to a snail's pace. His feathers twitched nervously. He felt his heartbeat pulse through his bad wing. Meager attempts to subtly stretch it towards the floor didn't relieve the discomfort. Did something happen? Did Dad change his mind? He wondered. The teacher called for lunch. Tenya resumed the guard position as Izuku rose to his feet on autopilot. His body made it to the roof of the school before his brain did. His lunch sat in his lap uneaten for half the PRD. At some point during that time, he just knew. Dad's retiring, he finally whispered to Tenya. His jaw dropped open. Really? He asked it like it was something obviously wrong. Something so terrible it could never happen. Just like Izuku and every other child who grew up in the world of All Might, he assumed he'd always be there. Why now? His injuries from 3 years ago are worse than he said. If he keeps working, they're going to kill him. All the emotion drained as acceptance took over. This was real and there was nothing he could do about it. Can I be alone for a bit? I don't know if that's a good idea, Tenya said, worry apparent. Then just go inside and watch me through the window or something, he snapped. His friend recoiled. I just need a minute. Reluctantly, he got up. I'll be inside if you need me. Thanks. Izuku waited for the sound of the door shutting before getting up himself, lunch abandoned. Moments later, gasps of shock and horror rose to the roof. The kids eating outside whipped themselves into a disbelieving frenzy in a matter of seconds. Against his better judgment, he checked his phone. Number 1 hero All Might announces his retirement, cites injuries and age. He didn't read further. Dad already told him what he'd say. How he would emphasize his faith in his peers to keep the good fight going, or something. If I wasn't such a screw-up, I could join them. He sighed heavily. It's my fault Dad has to retire early, even if he doesn't admit it. And I can't even pick up the slack. I'm not a natural-born hero like him. Or even Tenya. I don't have the strength. Though. He ran his fingers over the scars on his head. The hair never grew back there. I don't have a cool, strong quirk that can inspire people. I can barely use the one I have. A breeze rolled through his feathers, sending shivers down to his spine. Something overtook him. Slowly, he opened his wings. He hardly ever did so anywhere besides home those days. No point. They took up way too much space and got in everyone's way. Even his own. Especially his own. He couldn't sit in normal chairs or lay on his back. Izuku remembered how other kids would tease that they'd have to be cut off if he didn't learn to fly. Years later, and the only thing that changed was the wings getting bigger and his fuzzy feathers turning a darker gray. Nothing like the wings of birds or functional wing quirks he and Tenya researched. Getting rid of them altogether didn't seem so scary anymore. Shouldn't have sent him? Excuse me for making the wild assumption that a school would be able to keep its students from trying to kill each other. Dad shouted in the kitchen. They weren't trying to kill me, Izuku mumbled, pressing the washcloth back over his eye. If they really wanted to, they would have. They have the quirks to do it. Dad yelled even louder, so much Izuku felt the vibrations in the floor. He shut the bathroom door the rest of the way as if it would help. For once, he was grateful his feet didn't touch the ground sitting on the stool. The bruises were really visible now. Dark red splotches all over his body. The shower must have drawn them out. Maybe that was why Dad rushed him in as soon as they got home. He would need picture evidence if he planned to sue the school for negligence. That's what his phone screaming implied at least. Izuku sat there a while in his boxers waiting for him to come back and get it over with. The cool washcloth eased his throbbing eye mostly. That one hurt the worse. A peek behind revealed it to be pink and puffy, as if he'd been crying. He hadn't for the record. Hurry up it, he thought. Just sitting there in front of the mirror was starting to get uncomfortable. Izuku's eyes kept wandering to the weird, pronounced pudge of muscle under his pecs. Doctor said that's what his wings were attached to. Like a bird. He pinched it. The winged heroes don't have this though. Maybe it was because the rest of him was so small, they looked bigger. His wings certainly grew while the rest of him stayed the same. Fighting against the soreness, he pulled his knees to his chest and wrapped his wings around himself. They could hide him completely now. Broken feathers scratched against his skin. He supposed he should be grateful the bones weren't broken too. As if they weren't already screwed up enough. A knock at the door made him jump. Izuku! Come in! His wings dropped beside him. Did the shower help? Dad asked softly. He knelt down and took over holding the washcloth in place. A little. He sat there quietly while Dad's face jumped between emotions. He had the crying red eye too. That's good, Dad smiled sadly. Hey, how do you feel about going to a different school? Or maybe homeschooling? Izuku didn't react, even though he felt like he should. You can still see Tenya, of course. I just don't think that place is good for you. What gave it away? Izuku tried to roll his eyes, but that only made the hurt one worse. Sorry, Dad apologized, moving the cloth. He looked his son up and down, then sighed. I don't understand what they were trying to accomplish. They weren't trying to do anything. They're all pros kids. Nothing they do will have any consequences, so they don't bother thinking before they act because they know they don't have to, Izuku stated. It's not your fault. Dad sighed some more. You were gonna let me stay home, and I went anyway. Izuku, it's no one's fault but those DMN kids and teachers. You know that, right? He prompted. The pause. It's important that you know that. Yeah, I know. Do you? He pleaded louder than before. Because Night Eye told me you said you deserved it. Why? What was that? Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. I was trying to fly. Sniffle. Not an inch of lift. But all I did was knock dirt and trash all over where they were eating. Dad rose up just enough to kiss his cheek. Then his eyes wilted in that way that said he knew Izuku wasn't being completely honest. He had the good sense not to kick off their millionth argument about whether the kidnapping and everything around it was Izuku's fault of not. But then he had to go and open a whole new can of worms. Speaking of eating, your bento was still full. Izuku cringed. And you've only been picking at your dinner lately. Oh my God, Dad. I'm not starving myself. It was Dad's turn to cringe. Maybe you can force yourself to eat while the world is ending, but the rest of us have anxiety to deal with. I don't have a choice in the matter, anxiety or not. No stomach meant he had to eat meals more often. Even in the middle of the night. Because he lost it saving him. Why do you take every little thing and assume it means something's wrong with me? Izuku lashed out. He shoved Dad's hand away. I'm not made of glass. I can handle the truth. The truth is I love you, and I worry about you because I'm your father. Nothing is going to make that go away, he responded firmly. He put the washcloth back over his eye. His prosthetic arm laid over his knee. The one he used when fighting crime, Dad hadn't bothered to take it off yet. It was way thicker than his real arm. And when I see something wrong, I want to help you before it becomes a problem. Then stop acting like everything is okay. His voice cracked through the shout. His feathers bristled and Dad pulled his hand away. It's not okay. You admitted you aren't as strong as before to everyone. The villains who don't take advantage of that and come after you are going to go after everyone else. Dad closed his eyes with a sigh, anticipating Izuku blaming himself again. That set him off even more. And you refuse to admit my role in all of this. That's why they all come after me. Everyone knows it. Except you. So the truth is decided by committee, then? Dad raised his voice finally. He grabbed his shoulders before he could shirk away. I am sick and tired of talking in circles about this. Izuku, you are a child. There's no way you can control all the things that happen around you. That's the problem, he shrieked, wings flailing. He looked away from Dad's reaction. Don't you get it? I'm useless and I always will be. I'm not strong, I can't use my own quirk, and dash, he tugged his head feathers and clawed at his scars. I can't even be a pretty face people use to sell crap. You're retiring, it's all my fault, and I can't even do anything to make up for it. His folded wings flapped with every breath. So hard he stumbled on his feet. And these stupid wings. All they do is get in the way. They're vestigial. He ripped out a clump of feathers. I'm vestigial. Izuku sobbed. I'm always going to be a worthless drain at the mercy of everything and everyone around me, and there's nothing I can do about it. Izuku collapsed to the floor and buried his face in his hands. His wings formed a shell around him. Izuku, Dad said after a long silence. He heard his feet pad across the tile. You don't have to make up for anything. You bring so much to the world just by being alive. Hands encroached on Izuku's space, so he blocked them with his wings. I don't want to just be alive. I want to live. I want to do something for myself. Something great, he whimpered. Like you. Dad inhaled, painfully this time. His prosthetic clattered to the floor. Izuku watched him sit against the wall opposite him from between his feathers. If, he began breathily. He sounded strained all of a sudden. By something more than the tears pooling in his eyes. What if there was a way for you to be great hero? Like me. And Grandma Nana. That got his attention. And you wouldn't even need to fly? Izuku unwrapped his wings and eyed his father with confusion. Huh. Izuku had been to UA before, but not like this. Before, he would wait around in the teacher's lounge while Dad gave a guest lecture or something downstairs. Once or twice, he got to watch some students in a training exercise. Always far away, always at the edge. Now he was there. Right outside the perimeter wall of one of the city training zones. The only thing between him and his first real steps forward into a hero career was the starting buzzer. And 29 other applicants in his group. There wasn't much chatter in the small crowd. Everyone focused on stretching or adjusting their gear instead of trying to team up. Present Mike didn't explicitly say cooperation was against the rules at the briefing, but Izuku overheard some kids saying their friends and classmates had been deliberately put into separate field groups, so there was an effort to disincentivize them. That only applied to current classmates, considering Tenya was here. Or maybe it was because he got snuck in after the briefing started to avoid attention. He didn't want the nepotism of being a recommended student, but there were some advantages of being a pro's son even he couldn't resist. Back to Tenya. Izuku hadn't seen his friend in person in months once the final stretch of training ramped up. But ever the stickler for proper behavior, Tenya shook his head at his approach. Hey, fine, Izuku thought at him, hands raised. I'll text him after. Maybe we can hang out before the letters go out. I hope so. Hope we both get into. It'll be way easier to schedule stuff if we see each other every day again. He made his way to the fringe of the group. There weren't as many stretches he could do with an oversized trench coat on, but he didn't want the others to see his wings yet. Then, they would start formulating ways to go after him. The son of All Might was a surefire target, no matter the circumstance. He needed all the time he could get. And it looked to be up already. By chance, he caught one of the other students looking at him. They turned away just as fast. Izuku made the mistake of looking indignant, then the whispers started. Isn't that All Might's kid? The scars look the same. Haven't heard about him in a while. I almost forgot he had a kid. Who else could it be? I bet that hunchback is hiding his wings. They all looked at him again, judging him. Izuku's nerves slipped and he ducked away, awkwardly trying to adjust his coat. Laughter pierced through his heart. You think he still can't fly? Either way, he looks ready to snap in half from the pressure. That's what you get for being coddled all your life. He's out, a few of them said at once. Izuku's feathers bristled. If they've got such a problem with my wings, let's see how they like getting whacked in the face by them. He thought bitterly. But his legs remained nailed in place. If asked, he would have said he decided to be the bigger person, or he didn't want to get in trouble for fighting other applicants. The truth was everything slammed back into him. His quirk still didn't work right. He'd never fought other people before. Every time he tried to do something for himself, it went wrong. After 3 years of homeschooling away from the worst of his peers, training like a pro, and Dad instilling lesson after lesson of self-confidence, all it took were a few stray comments to turn him back into a sniveling middle schooler afraid of getting beat up for existing. One more reason on the pile to hate himself. On instinct, he looked back at Tenya. His expression tightened, but nothing else. Thanks for sticking up for me, I guess, he grumbled to himself. And begin. Present, Mike shouted from a rooftop. Everyone looked up. What are you waiting for? Real life doesn't have countdowns. Let's go, go, go. While Izuku hesitated, everyone else ran inside. He recognized Tenya's engine's raw, over-stomping feet. Still, he didn't move. Instead, he took off his coat. His feathers were his darkest molt yet, very nearly black, with hints of white on the underside of his wings. Those that weren't still fluffy down had become silky and curled at the ends. The wing tips spread wide enough to brush against either side of the entrance. And when he summoned one for all, lightning bounced between them like Tesla coils. My birth quirk may not work, but that's not the only one I have. 1 second, he was standing at the threshold of the arena. The next, he had his foot through the face of a robot. He sailed clean over the heads of his rivals. Crackling green energy trailed behind him. The moment dragged out just long enough for Izuku to regain his focus. He could do this. Izuku dove into a roll, wings serving as supports to push him off the ground back to his feet in no time. The next bot, he leapt over and grabbed its head, twisting it off with the momentum. Said head was then spin-chucked into another. Keeping score would have thrown off his rhythm. He didn't bother with the other students until he had to. One, a skinny blonde boy with some kind of torso laser quirk, wasn't paying enough attention and was about to get hit from behind by a one-pointer. Izuku scooped him up with one wing and redirected the bot's arm with the other. In a single fluid motion, he roundhouse kicked the face while tossing the other kid away. The second bot got in range, a much bigger three-pointer. Izuku had to put some of one for all into his wings to shield the blonde kid again. Contact jolted back up into his spine along with the strain of the quirk. But this time, the other kid helped with a laser shot to the bot's middle. Merveilleuse to work with such an elegant fighter, he praised with a wink. We make a bien team, wouldn't you, Kay? Izuku ran off. Like Present Mike said, real life doesn't give you countdowns or time for compliments. It was probably some tactic to distract me anyway. Amid the chaos, he saw Tenya. He'd been tall since the start of middle school, but the last few years of training bulked him up into the square, muscular body the rest of the men in his family had. That, plus precision kicks and Ida signature drifts, he looked like a pro already. And why wouldn't he? He came from a long line of heroes. His destiny was set as soon as he came. Out of the womb with budding exhaust pipes in his legs. Izuku's life didn't have that guarantee. He still had to prove himself worthy. In a flash of green, he shot past his childhood friend to take out the two bots he'd been aiming for at once. He looked back just in time to see Tenya's jaw drop. I'm here too. He wanted to shout. This is what I've been working on. Izuku landed in another roll to quickly change directions, but Tenya slide tackled the two-pointer in his path. He looked back, mouth set but eyes smiling. Game on. The two ping-ponged between buildings and bots. The other applicants faded into the background. Izuku and Tenya were the only real contenders. The former wondered, happily, If this counted as the fabled race the latter promised they'd do as children. It felt like it could be. But he also wanted to know how they'd fare against one another on open ground with no distractions. Izuku moved like a dancer while Tenya was a freight train. Here, they went back and forth on first place. Only they didn't. The further they went down the street, the clearer Tenya's lead became. He could bulldoze through way more foes at once, while Izuku was quicker about adjusting course from one to the next. He had to be. He was lither than his friend. Smaller. Fragile. One wrong move could mean serious damage, while the other's solid form gave him more room to take risks. Not to mention, he didn't have a third of his body weight and its most delicate parts growing out of his back to keep track of. Cut it out, he told himself, pulling one for all back out from his wings. Before you do something stupid, a siren wailed through the streets. It couldn't have been the stop buzzer. Izuku and Tenya both turned towards the sound, and were met with a gargantuan red light in the sky. They stopped, frozen in awe and terror. The zero-pointer. A robot bigger than most of the buildings it moved between. Its arm carved through a corner like a giant toddler running through a sandcastle. Even if it was worth points to defeat, such a thing was not feasible. Everyone ran. Izuku recalibrated his plan. With everyone running, he could probably hit the side roads and look for spare bots. As well as he felt like he'd done, he couldn't risk passing up opportunities. A scream cut through his thoughts. Behind him, towards the Colossus. He looked back and saw a girl. She got caught in the debris the zero-pointer knocked down. And she was right in the path of the robot's next step. There's no way they school is gonna let it step on her. They must have a fail-safe or something, he thought. His mind said to run back for the side streets, but his body stayed put. Like before. She'll be fine. I still need to pass. The zero-pointer caught sight of him, bathing him in red light. It paid the girl no mind, and raised its foot. Izuku moved. No plan, no goal, no thoughts. He just sprinted over the carnage-laden streets like his life depended on it. It didn't, but someone else's might. As instinct took over, his wings spread out. He felt the wind in every feather as he ran. But even in this adrenaline autopilot, he knew he couldn't rely on his wings. So he didn't. One for all surged through his body as easily as air in his lungs. This was his stability. His loyal weapon. His inheritance. Izuku couldn't help but recall his first outing with the quirk, where he shattered his arm before even winding up for a punch. The better part of 3 years was spent figuring out how to keep that much power at bay. But Izuku summoned it up once again. The concrete shattered beneath him. He tasted the wind in his eyes as he flew straight for the zero-pointer. 10% wouldn't be nearly enough. Not even 20. He had to go all the way. Dad's gonna be so upset with me. Full plume, 100%. Lights flashed. Red, white, and black. The zero-pointer's glass eye bent before it cracked to pieces under Izuku's fist, along with the glass on the surrounding facades hit by the shockwave. The whole rectangular face folded into itself like an accordion in an instant. It fell backwards in the next, well away from the girl below. He exhaled. Without thinking, his wings beat down. His body went up. Without falling. He felt it. What? His arm chose that moment to start hurting. Gah! Izuku grabbed his shoulder. The bruised and bloody limb flailed uselessly in the air. He tumbled forward, then down. Wait, no! 10 stories vanished in seconds. His wings thrashed to no effect. Maybe if I can just make an air blast with my finger, I can cushion the fall. Up and down blurred together. Without his earlier momentum, the previous strain of one for all started to lock up his muscles. He couldn't find his balance. After all that hard work. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I was such a W. Something that wasn't the ground hit him in the face. Izuku opened his eyes to see said ground rapidly approaching. He noticed a moment later that he was floating a few feet above it. Elise, the girl, the one trapped in the rubble, coughed out. Izuku managed to catch his fall, but immediately buckled from Quirk's strain in his legs. They weren't broken, but he had to use way more power than he was used to for that jump. But he wouldn't have made it down safe at all without the girl's help. Thank you for saving, he trailed off. The girl violently threw up over the hunk of metal she was draped over. Quirk side effect maybe? Whatever the reason, he waited until she was done to thank her. "Don't mention it," she said groggily, still shivering. The end buzzer sounded, and she sighed heavily. "Thank crap, I thought that was never going to end." Izuku let himself sit down. Yeah. He didn't like his wings touching the bare ground, but he suddenly realized how tired he was. Had he ever used that much of one for all stretched out that long? Or was it just the burst at the end? Maybe he needed to talk to Dad about more endurance training. If that was just the entrance exam, I can't imagine what classes are like. "Don't remind me," she responded, finally managing to squeeze free of where she was stuck. Izuku, embarrassingly, realized he probably should have asked if she needed help getting out. But she looked okay, if a little banged up, as she crawled over to sit across from him. "I'm Urarako Chako, what's your—" Her eyes lit up with recognition and Izuku couldn't help but roll his. "Here we go. You're Yagi Izuku, right?" He nodded passively. Uraraka covered her hand with her mouth, vision jumping between his face, more likely his scar, and wings. Then at the giant robot remains down the street. "Wow." "Yep," he said, unsure of what else to. "So you can fly, and you have super strength?" His mouth twitched. "Just strength," he muttered. "That's still so cool." She sounded excited. Probably one of those weirdos into celebrity gossip. Or maybe she was thinking about the money she could make selling this info to the tabloids. Wait, that was what was waiting for him if he got in. No more hiding at home or behind Dad. He suddenly got a bad taste in his mouth. Speaking of which, the rest of the applicant group approached. Murmurs and gasps of amazement crept into his ears. It hit him then. He took down a gigantic zero-pointer by himself, and no one else even tried. Even if it wasn't worthy point, it was still an accomplishment. Respectable. Though none of the gawkers seemed eager to apologize for writing him off. But before he could feel proud of himself, Recovery Girl came over to tell him off, Tenya hot on her tail. "That was quite a jump back there, young man. I'm fairly certain your father warned you about using too much of your quirk." "Yes, I'm sorry. I bet she already told on me. Can't do anything without Dad hearing about it." He leaned forward to let her kiss his cheek. "You did a good thing helping that young lady, but you need to be more careful about that quirk, especially using it in tandem with your wings," she went on, even though she'd healed them. He avoided looking at her to watch his flexing fingers. Izuku didn't think he'd ever get used to the feeling of his bones snapping back into place. It didn't hurt, but it wasn't exactly pleasant. It's one thing for hollow bones to be more fragile, but remember, they also don't produce blood cells the way most people's do. And the cells themselves are completely different. If you were to need a transfusion, you would be fresh out of luck. "I know. Why don't you just list off my entire medical history in front of all these strangers?" They were all staring at him now. Some padded where pockets would be, searching for phones left back at the locker rooms. Izuku scowled and got to his feet. Tenya moved to help him up, but he pushed him away. After all that, plus Recovery Girl's quirk sapping his energy, he wasn't in the mood to hang out anymore. "Did you see that? Looked like All Might's quirk." "Well, he is his kid." "But isn't he adopted?" Izuku held down a groan. One for all hummed under his skin, like it was begging to be let loose. "No, I can't just fight them." He looked away, and ended up facing the zero-pointer wreckage one last time. "I did that." Uraraka stood up hesitantly, aware the atmosphere had changed. She twiddled her fingers like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Then it occurred to him that they weren't looking at him as disgust, but curiosity. Maybe even awe. "I'll text you later," he told a still-stunned Tenya, before he made his way towards the entrance. Izuku felt the eyes on his back. He flexed his wings, both to stretch and to warn anyone away from getting ideas. "I'm strong now," he realized. "I really am strong now. I've never done anything like this before." He frowned. "But Recovery Girl is right. I'm still at a major disadvantage and I need to find a way around it." Izuku recalled that moment in the air where something, if only for a moment, finally worked. "And I won't rest until I get in right." And we're back. If you joined us during the break, This is the True Heroes Japan podcast's annual all-day graduation livestream, where we discuss and analyze all the outgoing graduates of Japan's top 10 heroic schools, looking at their past achievements and speculating on their career going forward. You sounded very professional there. Did I? You did very nice. Oh, you're complimenting me. Yeah. I thought you were making fun of me for a sec dash. Ha. Heh. Yes, well, all that's about to go down the drain. Why's the— oh, we're really doing that? Yep. Otherwise, people aren't gonna shut up about us covering it. True. Anyway, taking a brief detour from outgoing students to incoming, some of you true devotees may have heard about this already, but we've got some info about our favorite little angel, Yagi Izuku. Better known as the Son of All Might. Better known the catalyst for everything wrong in the world. Bwah! Ha! Not fooling around at all. Right into it. Just want to make sure everyone knows who we're talking about. Yeah, that's what you're going for. I'm not saying I agree, but the way people talk about him, it's like he's the Antichrist or something. I don't get that reference. It's not an anime reference, you dumb effing nerd. Ha! It's a Christian thing. All you need to know is that the Antichrist is just, like, the worst. The worst? How so? The guy who kicks off the end of the world. Oh, that makes sense. Doesn't it? Yeah. But let's get back on topic. Some people were already speculating that he was gonna try out this year. Did the math on his age, so we know he's about to be a freshman. Don't know why. I was more than happy to pretend he just stopped existing when he got pulled out of school. I thought you said you didn't agree with the people who hate him? I think some folks take it way too far, but that doesn't mean I like him. Fair. So, the reason we're talking about him after not hearing anything for 3 years is that he was spotted taking the UA entrance exam earlier this week. And no, this is not just a rumor, we had multiple confirmed exam takers message us to say what happened. Some also got pictures, and while we can't legally show those, they are pretty compelling. They're compelling in that he was there, but we don't have any action shots to confirm what people said he did. And what did he do, my dude? Apparently, he sliced through the exam like nothing, defeating more enemies than anyone, including knocking down a robot the size of a building in one punch. I can't even get through that with a straight face. Why is that? Because it's too perfect. Don't give me that look. The near universally hated son of a big hero, whose defining feature was that he couldn't use his own quirk, suddenly reappears out of nowhere and is now a total badass? He's got super strength and speed now? Out of the blue? Tell me that doesn't sound like a PR stunt. Not even 5 minutes back from the break and you've got the tinfoil hat on. Oh, and this doesn't sound sus to you? I mean kinda, but what gets me is I can't see the end goal for faking something like this. Like why? This would be so easy to disprove. All you'd have to do is get this kid on camera and G up a fight. Maybe All Might bribed UA to get his son in and this is the cover-up story. The cover-up would be way easier if he did the recommended student evaluation though. This is the open exam. And still, all that falls apart as soon as the kid shows up in public and can't do shit. Also, why send accounts and pictures to a couple of random teenagers and podcasters? I dunno. Astroturfing? You know what, yeah sure. Let's go with that. Alright, what else happened? Oh, that's it. Pftwaha. That's it, that's the whole story. Some people saw All Might's son at the UA entrance exam and he apparently did a good job. That's all folks. Then why the F are we even talking about it? Because people weren't gonna shut up about it until we did. Okay, so, Chad is asking why it's weird that All Might's son has super strength and speed. Well, first off, he's adopted, not his biological kid. And second, up until now, only quirk we knew he had was wings. Wings he can't use. I just want to point out none of the rumors said anything about him flying, so that sheet hasn't changed. You've got a point there. But now that's got me wondering, what if he was actually his bio kid? Do it. Hear me out. All Might claimed he found him as an egg outside his agency dash. Yagi Izuku hatched from an egg, by the way. Yep, and it's weird as hell. But then All Might took care of the egg for months before it hatched. Man's got money, I'm sure he could have hired people for that, if he didn't already have some on his payroll. Why would a full-time hero, not just that but the biggest hero of all time, take all that time on what looked like a giant bird egg? For no reason. Stop. I will not have this All Might slander in this house. You're saying that because it makes sense. He hooked up with somebody with a bird quirk dash. No. Bad. And pretended to find the egg to avoid scandal. Which backfired horribly, considering all the think pieces over the years about how society was robbed of an All Might dynasty. But I'm gonna shift gears right here, because the debate over whether strong heroes are obligated to have kids is a topic for a different episode, and we've still got 6 schools worth of analysis to go. I just want to say, All Might would probably still be working if it wasn't for that DM kid. Toshinori rounded the corner just in time to see Izuku's phone skid across the gym floor. Boy was lucky he had a good case. The screen thankfully wasn't damaged, but what was on it invoked a deep sigh. Some hero commentary show talking about him. Why does he keep watching this crap? I told him to stop. He leaned down to pick up the phone, joints cracking. Man, I'm getting old. Izuku still hadn't noticed him. He tended to get lost in his own little world when he trained, double so when he was angry. The noise from his repeated hits on the wooden dummy echoed across the giant room, though it was starting to feel too small for him. His wings reached over half the space lengthwise. That being said, he rarely stretched them out that far. The fighting style he and his father developed used his wings like a second set of arms to deal powerful blows and counters. Even across the room, one could see the way feathers curved around muscle contours. Wings joined Izuku's open hands in strike after strike on the pillar, constant rhythm only broken by the occasional kick that didn't seem to be in time with the others. Those looked the angriest. Izuku stepped back a few feet. Toshinori watched cautiously as his son's wings unfurled. Then sadness at the realization. Izuku leapt into the air, flapping his wings uselessly. Not even a boost from One for All in his jumps could get him truly airborne. Years of training with a new quirk and refocusing the use of his birth one, and it did nothing to quell that instinctual yearning. Not that Toshinori expected it to. It still broke his heart. Before he could step in, he saw green sparks followed by the unmistakable sound of cracking wood. Izuku! The boy flinched, swinging his wing back like a left hook punch. Toshinori ducked effortlessly. Retirement had yet to dull his reflexes. But Izuku's needed work. What were you doing? He asked, standing up to full height. He pulled all his limbs closer in an effort to look smaller. Training, one hand nursed his other. Behind him, the dummy frayed into wooden bits at the middle. Let me see. Toshinori held out his hand. I'm F-. Let me see, he said with his firmest parenting voice. Izuku relented, dropping his hand into his father's palm like money forked over after a lost bet. It looked red, but thankfully not broken, and Toshinori couldn't see any splinters. You're supposed to be taking it easy. He huffed in response. Recovery girl may have fixed your bones, but your muscles are still raw from quirk strain. I wasn't using my quirk, he defended suddenly. Toshinori eyed the dummy again. Aha. Gah, I need to keep training. Every one of my classmates has had a lifetime to train their quirks. I can't afford to be behind. Izuku spun on his heel towards the punching bags, pursued by his father. Behind? Another benefit of decades of media training and experience was he knew how to hold back his chuckles at such a ridiculous statement. With 3 years of private training in state-of-the-art facilities and one-on-one time with multiple professionals? I think you'll be fine. He went ahead to hold the punching back in place for him, but Izuku changed course towards the window. Their private gym sat on the 30th floor of my tower. Pollution was low, so they could see for miles out over Tokyo, all the way to the ocean in the distance. Somewhere south down the coast was the trash beach Toshinori had his son clean to prepare to receive One for All. They hadn't been back in a while. Maybe they should. Meanwhile, Izuku pouted. It looked almost comical, the way his cheeks puffed up like a little kid, but not as much as they used to. His baby fat started to drain away in the past year, leaving behind a thin but angular jawline and cheekbones. He hid his scars from view, but his father knew the way they had stretched and curved in different ways as a result of his shifting face. Same with his sliced ear that kept growing even though the top was gone. Izuku wasn't the same little boy he was when he got them anymore. But they won't be lugging 2 giant vestigial growths on their backs. Some things unfortunately hadn't changed. Izuku, we talked about you saying stuff like that. It's not healthy. The boy turned away further. Toshinori frowned, then forced a smile. And vestigial who? I saw you working that post. You could really do some damage with those suckers, he tried to encourage. I still have to prove myself to everyone. No, you don't. The pause. Izuku, you are a wonderful, amazing person and you're going to be a great hero. You're a quick thinker and you've improved so much with One for All since Dash. Then why did everyone at the exam dismiss me as a contender immediately? He cried. Toshinori was taken aback at this new information. Why does every hero podcast and magazine say the world would be better without me? And sighed frustrated at the old. Because they're assholes. Assholes with nothing better to complain about, he snapped, making Izuku flinch. Toshinori pulled back his tone. I guarantee most of them don't even believe the bullshit they say. They just think it's entertaining to hurt someone who's already struggling. And then the ones who do believe it are either weirdos who live vicariously through famous people, or eugenicists, neither of which have anything to say worth hearing. Izuku crossed his arms and put a wing between the two of them. Hey, look at me. He didn't, but Toshinori kept going anyway. Do you know what digital self-harm is? It's when you deliberately seek out stuff online you know will hurt you. It's a serious problem. There are always going to be strangers saying mean things on the internet, but we need to work on a solution to get you to stop looking for them. His giant hand dwarfed Izuku's shoulder. If he didn't have wings, Toshinori's fingers coupled probably cover the whole length of his back. You're still so small. His own shoulder prickled with sudden awareness of his prosthetic arm. I can't protect you from everything anymore, but I can at least. It's not just strangers, Izuku spoke up. He turned to his father, eyes red with unshed tears, accusation painted on his face. Toshinori knew what would come next, but that did nothing to lessen the sting. Why did Gran move out? He took his hand back as if it had been slapped away. Why did Sir leave to start his own agency? Toshinori recoiled with a shudder. How could he even begin to explain that? How 2 of the only adults Izuku was close to, his family, disapproved of him getting One for All. Gran called it nepotism plain and simple. Izuku was too young and immature, not to mention emotionally off-kilter from recent trauma, to know if he had the makings of a hero that could handle such a burden. He said Toshinori was too close. He wanted his baby to stop crying, so he brought in a short-term solution with any number of potential unforeseen consequences, and he couldn't bear to watch them happen to his grandson. And Nightai. He believed Izuku lacked not only the emotional fortitude but the heroic, reassuring presence necessary to be the next symbol of peace. All Toshinori's arguments that Izuku didn't have to be fell on deaf ears, and he refused to let the man poison his child with any more reasons to hate himself. Gran left on his own, Night-Eye was exiled. There was no way of saying all that in a way that didn't make things worse. Izuku Dash. Did you hear he's taken on an apprentice from UA? This big, strong-looking, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Dash. That's enough. No, it's not actually. Tears streamed down his face, riding along his cheekbones. The rest of the world already decided they don't like me. I've seen articles complaining that I'm a distraction from you being a hero, or that I'm keeping you from having a real family dating back to when I was a baby, he whimpered. Toshinori saw them too. He saw all those jeers and insults thrown at a literal infant, and despaired at how painfully they must have wedged themselves into his son's heart. He leaned down to hug him, but Izuku pushed him back with his wings. And it's only going to get worse once everyone else finds out I'm your successor. I have to be ready. His last words came out like a growl. He beat his wings as he walked back to the punching bag. Toshinori stood there frozen for an hour-long minute. The worst part was he knew. He knew Izuku had still been hurting, if not worse than ever, and he had no idea how to help him. If there's one thing growing up with a parent as a public figure instills, it's that people will just say whatever that think they have to for a good reaction. It's cynical, but it's not wrong. Kind words were drops of water on a trash fire, earnest or otherwise. Toshinori told his son how special he was, how much he loved him every day since he was born, and it still wasn't enough. Why would it be now? Why would this, the 100th time they've talked in circles about how worthless Izuku feels, be the one where a couple words can make everything better? He thought back to when Izuku was kidnapped. The moment he got the frantic call from Night Eye that something was wrong. Those long, endless hours when he had no idea what to do. The terror at learning all for one was involved. And knocking him out during the fight. In truth, he thought he was going to die that day, and that was the last time he would see his son. Then, literally falling apart at the seams at the bottom of a crater, feeling himself slipping away, only to hear his son call for him. He remembered that moment, holding his child again after everything, as a call to hope, a promise to keep living. Or when the other kids attacked Izuku. His son, his baby, passed out in the nurse's office covered in blood and dirt. He nearly ripped the roof off that school. Then they went home, and Toshinori offered one for all. Impulsively, he finally admitted. Izuku said he didn't have a future, and Toshinori wanted to prove him wrong and support his aspirations, like any good parent. His life and his quirk he dedicated to Izuku, and he still suffered. What else was there to give? I am here. As a projection. Toshinori watched his recording out of the corner of his eye. Izuku's UA acceptance letter. The reason he came up to the gym. In the first place. His hero voice sounded more like a stranger every time he used it these days. Like a parody of himself, especially compared to how he addressed his son. Speaking of which, why are you doing UA's acceptance letters? Izuku approached hesitantly. He'd stopped crying but his face was still puffy. They, gave me a job, he spoke evenly. I've had it lined up for a while now, but I wanted it to be a surprise. And new teachers don't get a say in the entrance exams, so don't worry. No strings on you here. And that was the truth. What he didn't say was why. Toshinori would have been content as a roving guest lecturer, as he had been since even before he retired. But as he thought back, to the kidnapping, the bullying, the panic every time he got a phone call since those things, worrying that something else had happened. Homeschooling had been just as much for him as Izuku. He got to keep him close, where he knew he was safe. Call it overprotective, but Toshinori lived in near constant worry for his son's life. But that wasn't all. He got to see him throughout his day instead of just at the beginnings and ends. Taking a long lunch break to eat together. Always close, whatever happened. No matter what happens, he began softly. Izuku looked up at him, like a child enraptured in a story. I'll be there to support you. I'm not ready to let you go just yet. And turns out that was the right thing to say, because Izuku ran up to hug him. Arms around his neck, wings around the rest of him. He didn't even have to mention Tenya getting in touch to check on him, or that brown-haired girl who offered some of her points because he took time away from his exam to save her. Maybe later. Toshinori pulled him all the way up against his chest, swaying back and forth. Another memory resurfaced, much more pleasant than the others. He held baby Izuku close to his chest and rocked him to sleep, just like this. A part of them would always be that, no matter what,